Hi guys, and welcome to Bedtime History Relaxing. Tonight we step into the damp, uneasy world of the year 1348, where the streets are narrow, the candles burn low, and every cough behind a shuttered window makes the whole neighbourhood listen. You're standing at the edge of a medieval town as the evening bell trembles through the mist, and somewhere nearby a cartwheel creaks over stone with a sound that no one wants to name. The air smells of rain, wood smoke, animals, and fear, which is not technically a smell, but in this year you would swear it has one. You have come as a healer, or at least as close to a healer as anyone can manage before microscopes, antibiotics, or sensible indoor plumbing. A small reality check very gently offered. You probably won't survive this, but at least your robe has pockets. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, tell us where you are listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now dim the lights and let the road pull you forward into the town gate. You arrive near dusk when the sky has turned the colour of old pewter, and the last birds are folding themselves into the eaves. Your boots sink slightly in the mud outside the walls. The guards at the gate do not joke with travellers tonight. They glance at your satchel, your wool cloak, your tired horse, and then at your face, as if they might be able to read infection there before it blooms. Their hands stay close to their belts. Not swords first, perhaps, but keys. Keys matter now. Gates matter. Doors matter. The whole world is becoming a set of barriers people hope disease cannot cross. Inside the town is still moving, but softly, almost guiltily. You pass a baker pulling flat loaves from an oven, the crusts crackling in the cooling air. You pass a woman with a basket of onions hugged to her chest as if they are treasure. A boy drives 2 goats ahead of him with a switch whispering instead of shouting. Even the animals seem to understand that something has changed. Or perhaps that is your imagination already tuning every ordinary sound into warning. People have heard stories for weeks, ships coming into ports with too few sailors, villages where fields stand half-tended, merchants bringing wool, spices, salt, and news that no one asked for. The sickness has moved along routes of trade travel and war, and by 1348 it has begun carving its way through parts of Europe with a speed that feels almost supernatural to those living through it. This is a mainstream fact. Plain and terrible, the Black Death caused by plague bacteria, carried through complex chains involving fleas, rodents, people and goods, killed a vast share of Europe's population into the mid-14th century. But you do not know bacteria. You do not know fleas as agents of empire. You know only breath, touch, swelling, fever, and the way neighbours stop meeting your eyes. Your appointment has not yet been spoken aloud, but you can feel it waiting. A town council has sent for help, and help in this case means someone willing to walk toward houses everyone else avoids. You're not the elegant beaked figure from later imagination, not yet. That famous long mask belongs more clearly to later plague centuries, especially the 17th century, though. People looking back will love to place it everywhere because humans do enjoy a dramatic silhouette. In 1348 you are simpler, poorer, and probably far less theatrical. A wool cloak, gloves if you can get them, a cloth over the nose, a bundle of herbs, a knife, a flask of vinegar, a pouch of dried plants that may do almost nothing but smell strongly enough to make you feel employed. The town clerk meets you near the square. He is a narrow man with ink on his fingers and sleep missing from his face. He carries a wax tablet, though he keeps rubbing it with his thumb as if numbers can be wiped away before they are written. He tells you the council will pay. Not grandly, of course. Grand payment is for king's bishops and people who sell grain during a panic. But enough. Food, lodging, a fee for each visit, perhaps a promise that if you fall ill, someone will pray for you. Medieval benefit packages are not exactly dazzling. You nod as though this arrangement is reasonable. The clerk leads you through the square where the fountain trickles under a skin of floating straw. There are fewer voices than there should be. A medieval town is usually a loud thing. Hammers, wheels, geese, bells, arguments, bargaining, gossip children, carts, dogs, sermons, songs, half remembered from taverns. Tonight the sounds are spaced apart. A cough from an upstairs room. A door closing. A bucket set down too hard. Somewhere a woman laughs once too sharply, then stops. At the church, candles shiver before painted saints. The priest is inside kneeling so still he might be carved from the same stone as the pillars. You notice the smell of beeswax and damp wool. A few townspeople pray at a distance from one another, which would be more impressive as public health if it were not guided mostly by dread. They cross themselves carefully. They glance at you when you enter because the clerk has already told someone and someone has told everyone else in the way towns do. You are the doctor. You are the person who may know what to do. Poor them. Poor you. Historians still argue whether people in 1348 experienced the plague mostly as a medical disaster, a spiritual punishment, a social collapse, or all of these at once layered so tightly that no one living through it could separate them. For you, the categories do not matter. The sick are not waiting for a thesis. They are waiting for breath. The clerk shows you the room where you will sleep above a cooper's workshop. Smells of oak shavings, sour beer, and old straw. Your bed is narrow. Your candle is short. Your wash basin has a crack through it like a little map of bad decisions. You set your satchel down and unpack slowly, as if by arranging your things you can arrange the world. Dried rosemary, sage, rue, a small jar of honey, linen strips, a cup, a lancet wrapped in cloth. A charm given to you by a woman outside the last village made from a scrap of parchment folded around a prayer. You do not fully believe in it, which does not stop you from keeping it. That is one of the quieter truths of this life. Belief is not always a clean yes or no. In times like this, people collect protections the way a cold person collects blankets. A prayer, a herb, a stone, a saint's medal, a physician's theory, a grandmother's remedy. A rumour about vinegar, a whispered instruction to avoid looking south before dawn. One quirky tidbit travels with some plague fears. People sometimes believed strong smells could guard the body, so they carried pomanders, herbs, or sponges soaked in vinegar, as if a nose filled with sharp perfume might block death at the doorway. It is odd, but also understandable. When danger is invisible, fragrance feels like armour. You sit on the edge of the bed and listen. Below you the cooper moves barrels with slow careful thumps. Outside the bell rings again, not the hour this time, but a warning or perhaps a call to prayer. The note hangs in the rafters. It seems to enter your ribs. Tomorrow you will visit the first house. You imagine it already. A shutter closed from inside, a mother whispering through the gap, a child hiding behind a stool, a man sweating through linen, while relatives hover close enough to love him and far enough to fear him. You will ask questions. When did the fever begin? Who else has fallen ill? Has there been swelling? Has there been pain? You will listen to answers that may arrive as sobs, accusations, bargains, or silence. And what will you offer? Perhaps a poultice? Perhaps bleeding because learned medicine still leans heavily on balancing humours within the body. Perhaps advice about air diet prayer, cleanliness by medieval standards, which is to say complicated and not always as filthy as modern jokes suggest. Though let us not get too generous about the drains. You may recommend burning herbs. You may tell them to keep linens aired. You may ask them to move the sick person away from the healthy, knowing full well that in a one-room home this suggestion has all the practical brilliance of advising the moon to step aside. Still you will, because someone must. Night thickens. Your candle leans and gutters. In the dark beyond the small window, the town seems to hold its breath around you. You remove your boots, your feet ache, your hands smell of horse leather, rosemary and metal. You lie down without undressing fully because no one trusts a peaceful night anymore. The straw crackles under your shoulder. A mouse scratches inside the wall with the confidence of a creature that has not read the mood. For a moment you almost sleep. Then a cry rises somewhere beyond the square. Not loud, not long, just a single human sound torn loose and swallowed again by the town. Your eyes open, the bell begins once more. The bell's last note fades into the rafters, and you stay awake beneath your thin blanket listening to the town rearrange itself around fear. A medieval town does not become quiet all at once. It resists silence. Somewhere a latch lifts. Somewhere else a bucket knocks against stone. A horse stamps in its stall, irritated by human panic, which is very much a horse's right. Then the sounds settle again, each one small and separate, like beads dropped one by one into a wooden bowl. By morning, the town seems to have aged. You step down from the room above the cooper's workshop, ducking beneath a beam polished by generations of taller people making the same mistake. The air is cold enough to sting your teeth. Smoke from breakfast fires lies low in the lane, not rising cleanly, but drifting in grey ribbons between the houses. It carries the smell of damp wood, boiled oats, onions, and the sharp stink of waste from the gutter. The street under your boots is slick with mud and straw. A chicken scratches near a doorstep with total professional focus, as if plague is not her department. You pass the cooper, who nods without smiling. His hands are broad and cracked, stained with pitch and ale. Yesterday, barrels meant trade and storage beer and fish flour and oil. Today, every useful object has gained another meaning. Barrels can hold water for washing. Barrels can block an alley. Barrels can store goods no one wants to touch. In a crisis, ordinary things become arguments with destiny. The square ahead is open, but not lively. The market stalls are standing, yet many are half empty. A woman sells eggs from a basket covered with cloth, revealing them only when a buyer comes close. A fishmonger has no fish, just salted scraps, and a face that dares anyone to complain. A cloth merchant sits behind a folded wool, his eyes moving from customer to customer, measuring not their purse but their health. You notice how people leave space between themselves. Not always much. The lanes are too narrow for modern comfort, and the town was built for commerce, not personal boundaries. Still, bodies curve away from one another. Conversations happen across thresholds. Hands hover before touching coins. A mother pulls her child back when he reaches toward a painted toy on a stall. The child begins to protest, then sees her face and goes quiet. Trade has brought the world here. Wool from one region, wine from another, spices travelling through ports and hands and stories. The same routes that carry pepper and silk also carry rumours, and sometimes worse. This is one of the hard facts of 1348 plague, spread along networks of movement including sea lanes and overland trade routes, making busy towns especially vulnerable. The very thing that gives a town its life, the flow of people and goods, now feels like a door left open in winter. You walk past the fountain. No crowd gathers there this morning. Two girls fill jugs quickly, their sleeves rolled, their hair covered. They whisper about a house near the tanner's lane. 3 dead, 1 dying, 1 gone mad with fever. Or maybe 5 dead. Or maybe none dead, but the priest called twice. Numbers swell in the telling. Fear is a talented accountant. At the edge of the square, a group of men argue outside the Guildhall. Their voices are low, but anger leaks through. One says the gates must close. Another says closing the gates will starve the town, which is a persuasive point when your stomach is not theoretical. A third insists that strangers should be turned away unless they bring grain tools or useful skills. You wonder where that leaves you. Useful, probably. Welcome, less, certainly. The town clerk spots you and hurries over, clutching his tablet beneath his cloak. He did not sleep much either. His cap sits crooked on his head, and ink marks the side of his thumb like a bruise. You must see the council, he says. You follow him through a lane where the houses lean close overhead. Their upper stories jut outward, making the sky a thin, pale strip above you. Water drips from eaves. Somewhere behind a wall, someone is scrubbing hard and fast, the brush rasping over wood. Scrubbing is good. Scrubbing is something to do. In times like these, action is a little raft, even when it does not reach shore. A dog trots past with a bone and receives a sharp curse from an old man at a window. People are watching from everywhere, through shutters, from doorways, behind hanging cloths. They look at you because you are carrying a satchel, because you walk with the clerk, because hope and suspicion often wear the same expression. Inside the Guildhall, the air is warmer and worse. Too many men in wool cloaks have been sitting too close together while pretending to manage disaster. There is the smell of sweat wax, damp fur, and stale breath. A fire smoulders in the hearth. On the table lie documents, coins, a loaf of bread no one has cut, and a small heap of dried lavender, which someone has placed there for the air, or for courage, or because lavender at least behaves itself. The council asks you question. Where have you practiced? What have you seen? Can you recognize the pestilence? Can you prevent it spreading? Can you treat it? How much will you charge? That last question arrives with impressive speed, proving that even near the end of the world, budgets remain immortal. You answer carefully. You say what you know and soften what you do not. Fever, pain, swellings. Weakness, sudden death in some cases. You speak of corrupted air, of avoiding foul smells, of separating the sick where possible, of cleaning rooms, burning herbs, washing hands and linens with vinegar or hot water when available. Some of this may help a little. Much of it will not help enough. But you are not there to say, gentlemen, the universe has brought a hammer and we are made of clay. Bedside manner matters. One alderman, broad and red-faced, asks whether the stars are to blame. A younger one asks whether the wells have been poisoned. A third asks if cats should be killed because someone has heard they carry ill luck. You resist the urge to ask how many rats the alderman plans to personally negotiate with afterward. Medieval people have many explanations, some learned, some religious, some practical, some dangerous. The trouble is not that they are foolish. The trouble is that they are frightened without the tools to see what is happening. A quirky little belief passes through the room, as if it has official shoes on. One man says that carrying a piece of bread in the pocket, blessed and never eaten, may draw sickness away from the body. Another says, no, it must be a toadstone. A third claims a dried spider worn around the neck has worked in the countryside. You make no face. Your profession requires many skills, and not laughing at a councilman's spider necklace is apparently one of them. Historians still argue whether town governments acted mainly out of compassion, fear of disorder, religious duty, or economic self-preservation when they hired medical workers and imposed emergency measures. From where you stand, the motives are braided together. They want fewer dead, yes. They also want fewer riots, steadier markets, calmer streets, and accounts that can still be collected when the bells stop ringing. The council agrees that you will begin at once. The clerk hands you a list of households. The names are written in a cramped hand, some crossed out, others added in the margins. Beside a few he has made marks, a dot for fever, a slash for death, a circle for uncertainty. So many lives reduced to small signs in wax. You step back outside with the list tucked into your sleeve. The town is brighter now, but not warmer. Sunlight touches the rooftops and makes the wet thatch shine. A cart creaks towards the churchyard covered with a cloth. No one stops to ask what lies beneath it. They already know enough. You move through the streets again, and each trade reveals the strain in its own way. The blacksmith's hammer falls less often than usual. The weaver's loom clacks behind a shuttered window, steady but slow. The tavern door is open, yet laughter does not spill from it. Even the smell of ale seems subdued, poor thing. At the apothecary's stall, dried herbs hang in bundles from the beam. Rosemary, wormwood, sage, mint, rue. Their scents mingle in the chill air, bitter and green. People buy them with desperate seriousness, as if a handful of leaves can bargain with mortality. A woman stops you beside the stall. Her face is lined but firm, and she holds a little girl by the shoulders. The child stares at your satchel. Are you the doctor? You say yes. The woman swallows. Will you come after what she does not say? After the council, after the priest, after the fever breaks, after hope has tried everything else. You ask where. She points toward a lane that slopes down to the river. Tanners live there, dyers too, and the smell is famously terrible even in peaceful years. Bad air, people say, miasma, corruption rising from rotten filth. It is not an unreasonable suspicion when the place smells like wet leather, urine smoke, and regret. I will come, you tell her. She nods once. The little girl keeps staring. You wonder whether she will remember your face if she survives. You wonder whether anyone will. As you continue, the town seems to pulse around you. not with health but with waiting. Every doorway is a question. Every shutter hides a story. The plague has not merely entered bodies, it has entered habits. It changes how bread is bought, how prayers are spoken, how close lovers stand, how quickly neighbours look away. It turns the familiar town into a map of risk, and you, with your herbs and linen and insufficient courage, are being asked to walk every road on it. At the far end of the lane, the first house on the clerk's list waits with its shutters closed. You pause outside. From within comes a low murmur. You lift your hand to knock. Your knuckles hover against the wood, and for one strange second, nothing happens. The whole lane seems to narrow around your hand. The river smell drifts up behind you, sour and wet, mixed with smoke from breakfast fires and the sharper stink of hides soaking in vats. Somewhere a gull crows, though the town is far enough inland that it feels like a mistake. Even the gull sounds uncertain, as if it has arrived in the wrong century and would like to speak with management. You knock. Inside movement stops. Then boards creak. A bolt slides back slowly, reluctantly, and the door opens only as wide as a face. The woman who looks out is perhaps 30, though worry has pressed another decade around her eyes. Her linen cap is tied badly. One cheek is red, as if she's been sleeping against her hand or not sleeping at all. "You are the one they sent," she says. Not a question. In a town, this frightened news travels faster than horses. You tell her yes, and she lets you in. The room is low and smoky, with a hearth in one corner, and a table pushed aside to make space near the wall. A man lies on a straw mattress under a blanket, his face turned away from the light. A boy of about 12 sits on a stool beside him, holding a cup with both hands. Two younger children watch from behind a hanging cloth, their eyes round in the dimness. The room smells of sweat, tallow, old rushes, vinegar, and the damp leather smell that clings to this lane no matter how often anyone scrubs. It's not a grand home, but it is not neglected. Bowls are stacked neatly. A broom rests by the door. Someone has tried to keep order, which may be the bravest thing in the room. You take a breath through the cloth you have tied loosely over your nose. You are now doing the work, not the idea of work discussed in the Guildhall, not the tidy list in the clerk's hand. This is the work itself, stepping close while everyone else leans back. The man's name is Martin, his wife tells you. He was at the vats 2 days ago. He complained of pain under the arm that evening. By morning, fever. By night, he could not stand. She says these things quickly, as if speed might keep them from becoming true. You kneel beside him, feeling the straw crackle under your knee. His breath is shallow and hot. His skin has a flushed, tight look. When you ask him to turn, he groans, and his wife flinches as though the sound has struck her. You examine him with what calm you can gather. Learned medicine in 1348 rests on ancient authorities, especially Hippocrates Galen, and later Arabic and Latin medical writers. Physicians are taught to think in terms of humours, balance, air, season, temperament, diet, and the body's inequalities of heat, cold, wetness and dryness. It is a serious intellectual tradition, not a simple pile of nonsense, even though from where a modern listener rests comfortably under a blanket, it is missing some rather important information. Tiny bacteria, for example. Quite a big omission. Not their fault. Microscopes not exactly available next to the onions. You ask about the household. Who sleeps where? Who ate with him? Who visited? Has anyone else felt feverish? The wife shakes her head too quickly. The boy looks down into the cup. Your role is awkward, because in 1348 a plague doctor is not yet the fixed image later centuries imagine. Towns sometimes hire medical men, surgeons, barbers, apothecaries, or anyone willing and thought capable enough to tend the sick record cases or advise authorities. Some are trained at universities. Some are practical healers. Some are desperate men accepting desperate pay. You fall somewhere in that wide, uncertain middle. You know enough to be useful and not enough to be safe. A charming combination, really. The council calls you doctor because the town needs a title. The title is a cloak thrown over for fear. You open your satchel. The children behind the hanging cloth lean forward. People love tools. Tools suggest a plan. You lay out linen strips, a small knife, a cup dried herbs, and a little jar of ointment made from fat and strong-smelling plants. The wife watches every movement. She wants your hands to reveal certainty. You wish they would. Martin mutters something. You bend closer. His breath smells sour, feverish. He asks whether he will live. This is the question behind every door, and no training makes it easier. You do not say yes. You do not say no. You say that you will do what can be done, that his family must keep the room aired, when possible, that linen should be changed, that vessels used by him should be washed, that the children should not crowd near the bed. The youngest child immediately takes a step backward, then looks ashamed as if obedience has betrayed love. There it is, one of the plague year's cruelest lessons. Care itself becomes dangerous. Love wants to sit close, wipe the face, share the cup, hold the hand. Fear tells love to move away. No one knows how to do both well. You examine the swelling under Martin's arm. You do not linger longer than needed. PG-13 is kind to everyone, including you. The swelling is painful, angry, and unmistakable enough to darken the wife's expression before you speak. You prepare a poultice with herbs and warm cloth. You consider bleeding him as many practitioners would, depending on training and judgment, because removing blood is believed to relieve excess or corrupted humours. Yet he is weak already. You hesitate, and in that hesitation lives the whole uncertainty of medieval medicine. Historians still debate whether many practitioners during the Black Death truly believed their treatments could defeat the disease, or whether they saw themselves as offering order, comfort, and ritual when cure was unlikely. In this room, the distinction is not clean. You're trying to help. You're also trying to give the family something to do besides watch the candle burn lower. You ask the wife to heat water. The boy rises too quickly and nearly spills the cup. You catch it before it falls. His fingers brush yours. Both of you notice. Neither of you says anything. While the water warms, the wife tells you that 2 houses away an old woman has hung bundles of garlic above every window. Across the lane, someone has nailed a horseshoe over the door upside down, though another neighbour insists that lets the luck pour out. A travelling peddler claimed that if you write certain holy words on an apple and eat it before sunrise, sickness will pass you by. The wife gives you a look that asks whether this is foolish. You answer gently that prayer and hope do no harm, but clean cloth space and fresh air may do more. You do not mention that the apple charm sounds like a recipe for disappointment with a breakfast. A quirky tidbit, half medical and half magical, lingers in your own memory. Some medieval remedy collections recommended ingredients that seem bizarre, now including powders made from precious stones, animal parts or mixtures, timed to astrological hours. Medicine could be a blend of observation book learning, folk practice, religion, and celestial scheduling. In other words, the appointment calendar was complicated and Mercury was somehow invited. You wash your hands in warm water and vinegar, not perfectly, not with modern understanding, but the sharp smell rises clean enough to soothe the mind. You instruct the wife to burn rosemary, if she has it, not because it will command the plague to pack its little bags, but because it may sweeten the air, calm the household, and perhaps keep insects away. Small benefits matter when large ones hide. You leave linen near the bed and show the boy how to dampen a cloth for his father's forehead. The boy listens with fierce attention. Giving a child a task can be mercy. It turns terror into duty, and duty has edges a person can hold. Before you go, the wife takes your sleeve. Should I send for the priest? You look at Martin. His eyes are half open, bright with fever. Yes, you say softly. Send. Her mouth trembles, but she nods. It is not surrender. Not exactly. In this world, priest and doctor do not stand as opposites. They arrive at the same bed by different doors. Body and soul are both in danger, and everyone wants all possible help. Outside, the lane feels colder. You close the door behind you and stand for a moment with your hand still on the latch. The town continues around you. A cart passes at the lane's end. Someone beats dust from a blanket. A bell rings for prayer or warning or both. You can no longer tell. You have become the doctor. Nobody wants, because wanting you means needing you. People will search your face for rescue, resent your failures, fear your touch, and still call you back. They will ask you to enter rooms heavy with breath and grief. They will offer coins wiped clean on aprons. They will ask whether the worst has passed, and you will hear yourself answer in careful phrases. You look down at your hands, they smell of vinegar smoke and fever. Then the clerk appears at the far end of the lane, lifting the list. There are more doors. The clerk waits for you with that same strained patience, holding the list like a map he wishes would redraw itself. You walk toward him, the damp air from the river clinging to your cloak, and for a moment you consider how quickly this has become your life. Yesterday you were a traveller. Today you are the person who knocks on doors people hesitate to open. He adds another name to the wax tablet with a small stylus pressing harder than needed. The mark gouges deeper than the others. More, he says, not looking at you. Of course, there are more. You nod, and together you move away from the river lane back toward the centre of town. The streets feel narrower now, not because they have changed, but because you have. Every shadow seems to hold a possibility. Every window might conceal a face watching for you. Somewhere behind you, the house you just left continues its quiet struggle. The sounds already fading into the layered hum of the town. Your next stop is not a house, but the apothecary's stall. If you are to keep walking into rooms like that, you will need more than courage and a handful of linen. The apothecary stands behind his wooden counter, surrounded by hanging bundles of dried plants and small jars stoppered with wax. The air here is thick with scent. Bitter greens, sharp oils, something sweet beneath it all, like honey left too long in the sun. He looks up as you approach, and for a second his face softens with recognition. Then it tightens again. Everyone is measuring risk now, even those who deal in remedies. You are busy already, he says. You give a small nod. There's no need to elaborate. He begins pulling items without waiting for your request. Sage, rosemary, wormwood, rue. A jar of vinegar infused with herbs. A packet of ground spices that smells faintly of cloves and cinnamon. These are not cures, not in any modern sense, but they are part of the medical thinking of the time. Strong scents are believed to purify the air, to counteract the invisible corruption thought to spread disease. The theory of miasma, that sickness travels through foul air, shapes much of what you and others will do. You accept the bundle, weighing it in your hands. It feels like responsibility. The apothecary leans closer, lowering his voice. They say in the next town they burn juniper day and night, he whispers. Thick smoke. Some claim it keeps the illness from entering. You glance at the herbs. And does it? He shrugs a small, helpless motion. They still bury people. There it is again. The quiet admission that no one truly knows what will work. You pay him with coins that feel heavier than usual. Money has begun to change meaning. It still buys things, of course, but it also carries a question. What is anything worth if the future itself feels uncertain? As you turn to leave, a woman at the edge of the stall presses something into your hand. It is a small pouch tied with thread. For protection, she says quickly before stepping back. Inside you later discover is a mixture of dried herbs and a tiny scrap of parchment marked with a prayer. People have started creating these little bundles, wearing them around the neck or tucking them into clothing. They are part remedy, part key to charm, part hope stitched together. You slip it into your satchel. Refusing it would feel like rejecting more than the object itself. You continue through the market, noticing how the rhythm of buying and selling has slowed. Bread is still exchanged, meat is still cut, but conversations are shorter, glances quicker. A man counts coins twice before handing them over, then wipes his fingers on his tunic as if that might erase risk. In one corner, a group of townsfolk gathers around a speaker standing on a crate. He is not an official, just someone with a loud voice and a theory. He claims the sickness comes from distant lands as punishment carried by foreigners and travellers. His words stir unease. You recognise this pattern. When fear grows, people search for something to blame. It is easier to point at a person than at something unseen. You move on before the crowd thickens. Near the church, the priest stands outside now, speaking with a small cluster of parishioners. His voice is steady, but his eyes flicker toward the street as if he is listening for something else. He sees you and nods a silent acknowledgement of shared duty. You both walk towards suffering, just by different paths. The clerk leads you next to a house near the square. Unlike the river lane, this one is better kept with cleaner walls and a small garden out front. Even here the shutters are closed. You knock. A servant opens the door. This time her face pale but composed. She leads you inside to a room where a young woman lies on a bed, her breathing uneven. The contrast between this house and the last is striking. The bed is softer, the linens finer, the air slightly less harsh. Yet the illness feels the same. It does not care about status. You begin your work again. Questions, observations, gentle instructions. The family listens closely, their concern wrapped in a kind of quiet discipline. Wealth brings comfort, but not immunity. This is another truth that has begun to settle over the town. The sickness moves through rich and poor alike, ignoring walls and coin. As you prepare a mixture of herbs and instruct the servant on its use, the woman's father approaches you. "Tell me plainly," he says. You meet his gaze. "I will tell you honestly," you reply. It is a careful distinction. He nods, understanding more than you say. People often do. You leave the house with another small coin pressed into your palm. Payment for effort, not for outcome. The distinction grows heavier with each visit. Back in the street, the clerk checks his list again. You are needed at the edge of the town, he says, near the fields. You follow him once more, your satchel heavier now with herbs, cloth, and small offerings from strangers. The town stretches out before you, each street a thread in a fabric that feels as though it is beginning to fray. As you walk, you reflect on how medicine here is as much about presence as it is about treatment. There is knowledge, yes, drawn from books and teachers, but there is also something else. A willingness to stand in the doorway when others step back, to listen, to touch, to try. And perhaps that is why you are here, not because you can stop what is coming, but because someone must face it. The road ahead slopes gently toward open land where the smell of earth replaces the tight, crowded air of the town. A cart passes you loaded with sacks of grain. Life continues stubbornly even now. You adjust your cloak against the wind and keep walking. There are still more doors. The edge of the town feels different the moment you reach it. The tight press of buildings loosens and the air shifts, carrying the scent of soil, damp grass, and distant animals. It should feel like relief, but it does not. The openness only makes the silence more noticeable, as if the land itself is listening. The clerk slows his pace and points toward a small cottage set apart from the others. Its thatched roof sags slightly, and a low fence leans at an angle that suggests it has not been repaired in some time. No smoke rises from the chimney. That more than anything catches your attention. "No one has come out since yesterday," he says quietly. You nod, though your chest tightens. A house without smoke is a sentence waiting to be read. You approach the door alone this time. The clerk hangs back, not out of cowardice, but out of habit. Your role is already becoming defined. You go forward, others remain behind. The door is not locked. You push it open gently, and the hinges creak in protest. Inside, the air is stale, heavy, with the scent of sickness and something else beneath it, something still and final. Light filters through a small window, casting a pale square on the floor. A woman lies on a pallet near the hearth, her face turned toward the ceiling. Her eyes are closed. Beside her, a man sits slumped against the wall, his head tilted at an unnatural angle. A child rests near the door, curled as if asleep. You do not need to step further inside to understand. You stand there for a moment, letting the weight of it settle. This is not your first encounter with death, but it is your first in this town, and it carries a different kind of gravity. These are not distant stories or warnings whispered in markets. These are people who were alive yesterday, who ate, spoke, worried, and planned in the same narrow space you now occupy. You step inside, moving carefully. The floorboards creak under your weight. The room feels frozen, as if time itself paused when the last breath left. You check each of them, though you already know. It is a ritual as much as a necessity. Hands placed gently. Breaths, counted that do not come small, confirmations of what is already clear. Outside, the clerk waits. You return to the doorway and meet his eyes. You do not need to speak. He understands. He scratches another mark onto his tablet, his hand shaking slightly. This is how the town begins to keep count. In many places during this period, local authorities attempted to record deaths, not always with precision, but with enough consistency to grasp the scale of loss. Lists were made, names written or symbols marked, creating early forms of mortality records. They were imperfect, often incomplete, but they represent a human effort to measure something that feels immeasurable. You close the door behind you more out of instinct than purpose. It feels wrong to leave it open, as if the stillness inside should be protected. What happens now, the clerk asks. You consider the question. There are procedures, though they vary. Bodies may be buried quickly, sometimes with little ceremony. In some cases, neighbours or designated workers handle the task. In others, families would, if any, remain. They must be buried, you say, soon. He nods, though his face pales further. Arranging burial is no longer a simple matter. It requires people willing to do the work, and those people are becoming harder to find. As you turn away from the cottage, a breeze moves through the grass, carrying the faint rustle of leaves. It feels almost peaceful, which makes the contrast sharper. Life continues just beyond the fence, indifferent and steady. You walk back toward the town in silence. The clerk eventually speaks again, his voice low. Some say the illness comes from the alignment of planets, he says, that the stars themselves have turned against us. You glance upward, though the sky is pale and empty now. There was indeed a belief among many learned individuals of the time that celestial events influenced earthly health. Astrological explanations were taken seriously, with some attributing the plague to a rare conjunction of planets that corrupted the air. It is a reminder that even educated minds sought answers in the patterns they could observe, however distant. And others, you ask? He hesitates. Others say it is punishment, he replies, for sins we do not yet understand. You do not answer. There is no comfort in choosing between explanations that offer no remedy. As you re-enter the town, the sounds return muted but present. A cart rattles over stone. A door closes. A voice calls out briefly, then falls silent. The rhythm of daily life persists, though it has slowed, as if the town is moving through thick water. Near the square, you notice a small group gathered around a man holding a bundle of strange objects. He speaks animatedly, offering them for sale. Curiosity draws you closer. He displays what he claims are protective items. Small stones, bits of bone, pieces of cloth marked with symbols. One particularly odd item catches your eye, a small amulet containing what appears to be a dried frog. He insists it has been blessed and will ward off illness if worn close to the skin. The people around him listen, some with skepticism, others with quiet hope. This kind of trade has begun to flourish. In uncertain times, the line between medicine and superstition blurs. People seek protection wherever they can find it, even in the most unusual forms. It is not foolishness so much as desperation given shape. You move on, leaving the crowd behind. The clerk checks his list again, though his movements are slower now. There is one more for today, he says. You nod, though fatigue has begun to settle into your bones. The weight of the morning presses against you, each visit adding to the strain. Yet you continue, because stopping is not an option anyone has offered. The next house stands near the edge of the square, its door slightly ajar. As you approach, you hear voices inside, hushed and urgent. You step through the doorway and find a family gathered around a bed. This time the person lying there is still alive, though barely. The room is filled with tension, each breath counted, each movement watched. You set down your satchel and begin again. This is the rhythm now. House to house, breath to breath, question to question. Outside, a town waits. Inside, time narrows to the space between heartbeats, and you, whether ready or not, are part of it. You set your satchel down beside the bed, and the family parts slightly to make space for you, though no one moves very far. They hover close, caught between instinct and caution, as if stepping back might somehow abandon the person lying before them. The air in the room is thick and warm, carrying the smell of body's breath and something faintly metallic beneath it all. A single candle burns near the head of the bed, its flame wavering with each movement in the room. Light flickers across anxious faces. A man stands with his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles have gone pale. A woman murmurs softly under her breath, repeating the same phrase again and again, perhaps a prayer, perhaps just a rhythm to keep herself steady. You lean closer to the patient. A young man not much older than the boy from earlier. His skin flushed, his breathing uneven, sweat beads along his brow catching the candlelight. His eyes open briefly, unfocused, then close again, as if the effort is too much. You ask your questions, though by now they feel almost ritualistic. When did it begin? Who else is ill? Has there been pain, swelling, weakness? The answers come in fragments passed between family members like pieces of a story no one wants to tell in full. You listen, nodding your mind, sorting through what little certainty you have. Patterns are beginning to emerge. The sudden onset, the fever, the weakness that follows. It is not knowledge that brings comfort, but at least it gives shape to the unknown. You reach into your satchel and take out a small bundle of herbs, rosemary, sage, and a pinch of something more bitter. You crush them gently in your hand, releasing their scent, then place them into a small bowl near the candle. The smell rises sharp and clean, cutting through the heavier air. People in this time often believe that strong, pleasant smells can counteract harmful ones. The idea that disease travels through corrupted air leads many to carry fragrant plants or burn them indoors. It is not entirely without effect. While it does not stop the illness, it may improve the air slightly, and perhaps more importantly, it gives people a sense of action, of doing something against an unseen threat. You instruct the family to keep the room as aired as possible, to change linens when they can to keep the patient hydrated. These are simple measures, but in a world without advanced knowledge of infection, they are among the few tools available. The man at the bedside watches you closely. Will this help, he asks. You meet his gaze, choosing your words carefully. It may ease his suffering, you say. It is not the answer he wants, but it is the one you can give. He nods slowly, as if accepting a truth he already suspected. As you continue your work, you become aware of a faint smell drifting in from outside. Smoke, but not the usual kind, from hearth fires. This is thicker, more deliberate. You glance toward the window. They've started burning in the streets, the woman explains. Herbs wood, anything that makes smoke. You nod. This practice has begun to spread into many places. Fires are lit in public areas in the belief that the smoke will cleanse the air, driving away whatever unseen force carries the illness. It is a communal act, one that brings people together even as they try to stay apart. You finish preparing a simple mixture and show the family how to apply it. Their hands move carefully, following your instructions with a kind of reverence. In moments like this, even the smallest task can feel significant. Before you leave, the woman presses a small piece of cloth into your hand. It is embroidered with a simple pattern worn at the edges. For your protection, she says. You accept it with a nod, adding it to the growing collection of tokens in your satchel. Each one carries a story, a fragment of hope from someone who has little else to offer. As you step back into the street, the smoke is more noticeable now. Thin streams rise from several points around the square, drifting upward and spreading through the air. The scent is strong, a mixture of herbs, wood, and something acrid. You pause for a moment, watching as townspeople tend the fires. Some stand close, feeding them with branches and scraps. Others keep their distance, covering their noses with cloth. The town is trying to protect itself in the only ways it knows how. You move through the square, the smoke curling around you, clinging to your clothes. It feels almost tangible, as if it could form a barrier between you and the illness. You know better, or at least you suspect, but even you feel a small measure of comfort in it. A group of children runs past, their laughter brief but real. It is a surprising sound, one that cuts through the tension like a shaft of light. For a moment the town feels almost normal. Then the laughter fades and the weight returns. Near the church you see the priest again, this time speaking to a larger group. His voice carries over the square, steady and calm. He speaks of faith, of endurance, of the importance of caring for one another even in difficult times. People listen, some with heads bowed, others with eyes fixed on him as if he might hold the answers they seek. You do not linger. There is still work to be done. As you walk, you reflect on how quickly the town has adapted. New habits have formed almost overnight. People avoid close contact when they can, they clean more frequently, they burn herbs, carry charms, whisper prayers. Not all of these actions are effective, but they represent an attempt to regain control, to impose some order on a situation that feels chaotic. You reach the edge of the square and pause, checking the list in your sleeve. There are still names marked, still doors to knock on. The day is far from over. Fatigue tugs at you, a quiet but persistent presence. Your legs ache, your shoulders feel heavy, and your mind's beginning to blur at the edges. Yet you continue because there is no alternative. You turn down another street, the smoke thinning as you move away from the centre. The air here is cooler, carrying the scent of damp stone and distant fields. Ahead, another house waits. Another door. Another store. Story. You take a breath, steadying yourself, and step forward. You step into the narrower street where the stones are uneven and the walls seem to lean inward as if sharing secrets. The smoke from the square thins behind you, replaced by a colder, sharper air that carries the faint scent of damp mortar and something sour from a nearby drain. It is quieter here. Not peaceful quiet, but the kind that listens. Halfway down the lane you notice it. A door marked, a crude symbol scratched into the wood, not carefully drawn, but urgent, uneven. Beside it, a strip of cloth tied to the latch. It is not an official sign, not yet part of any formal system, but it means something all the same. A warning, a signal, stay away. You slow your steps. This is how it begins. Not with grand decrees, but with small acts of separation. A mark on a door, a neighbour choosing not to visit, a family closing itself off from the rest of the street. You have heard of such measures in other places. In some towns and cities, authorities will soon begin enforcing isolation more strictly, requiring households with sickness to remain inside for a set number of days. Watchmen may be stationed outside to ensure compliance. It is an early form of quarantine, though the term itself comes from later Italian practices involving 40-day isolation periods for ships. The idea is already forming, even if the details are not yet fixed. You approach the marked house anyway. That is your task now, to cross lines others draw. You knock, and for a long moment nothing happens. Then a voice from inside, thin and strained. Go away. You hesitate, then speak through the wood. I am here to help. A pause. Then the sound of movement, slow and cautious. The door opens just enough for an eye to appear red and rimmed with exhaustion. You should not come, the voice says again. You meet the gaze steadily. And yet I must. The door opens wider. Inside, the air is stale, heavier than the previous houses. The windows are shuttered tightly, as if the family believes the illness waits outside, pressing to get in. The room is dim, lit only by a small lamp. Shadows cling to the corners. 3 people sit close together near the hearth. A 4th lies on a pallet, barely moving. The others watch you with a mixture of relief and dread, as if your presence confirms what they have tried not to name. You step inside and close the door behind you. The man nearest the hearth gestures toward the pallet. It started with her, he says, his voice low. Then my brother. Now we wait. The words hang in the air. You kneel beside the woman on the pallet. Her breathing is shallow, her skin pale beneath a sheen of sweat. You can feel the heat radiating from her even without touching. The room feels smaller the longer you remain in it. You ask your usual questions, though by now they come more gently shaped by the knowledge that answers may not change the outcome. The man responds, his voice steady but distant, as if he is recounting events that happened to someone else. You notice how the family sits close together, despite everything. Their shoulders nearly touch. One woman rests her hand on the arm of the man beside her, her grip firm. Fear has not driven them apart here. Not yet. You begin to prepare what little care you can offer. A cloth dampened with water, a mixture of herbs placed near the pallet, instructions spoken softly so as not to disturb the fragile stillness. As you work, you become aware of another presence in the room, not a person, an absence. The silence here is different. It is not the quiet of rest or peace, but the quiet of waiting, of breath held too long. You finish your preparations and turn to the family. You must keep the air moving, you say. Open the shutters when you can. The man shakes his head. We cannot, he replies. What if it comes in? There it is again. The belief that the danger lies outside, waiting to enter through cracks and openings. It is a reasonable thought given the understanding of the time. If bad air brings illness, then sealing the house might seem like protection. You choose your words carefully. The air within grows stale, you say. It may do harm of its own. He hesitates, then nods slowly. It is not fully agreement, but it is enough. A small detail catches your eye as you gather your things. Hanging near the doorway is a bundle of dried plants tied with string, along with a small object carved from bone. It appears to be shaped like a tiny hand. You gesture toward it. For protection, you ask. The woman nods. It was given to us by a traveller, she says. He said it would keep sickness away. You study it briefly. Such objects are not uncommon. People carry charms of all kinds, believing they can ward off illness or misfortune. Some are rooted in tradition, others in rumour, but all serve the same purpose. They offer a sense of control in a world that feels increasingly unpredictable. You do not challenge it, there is no need. Instead, you finish your instructions and prepare to leave. As you reach the door, the man speaks again. If we stay inside, he says, will we be safe? You pause. It's a question without a clear answer. It may help you say quietly. He nods, though his eyes reveal that he understands the uncertainty behind your words. You step back into the street, closing the door behind you. The mark on the wood seems more significant now, as if it carries the weight of everything inside. Further down the lane, you notice another door with a similar symbol, and another beyond that. The pattern is spreading. Neighbours are beginning to take matters into their own hands, marking houses, avoiding contact, creating invisible boundaries within the town. It is not organised, not yet, but it is effective in its own way. People are learning, adapting, even without fully understanding the nature of the threat. You walk slowly, taking in the changes around you. A woman passes carrying a bundle of cloth, her face covered with a scarf. A man stands outside his home, speaking to a neighbour from several paces away. Children play in smaller groups, their movements more subdued. The town is reshaping itself. As you reach the end of the street, you hear voices raised in argument. A small crowd has gathered near the corner, their tones sharp and urgent. You approach cautiously. Two men stand facing each other, one pointing toward a nearby house. They should not be allowed out, he insists. They bring danger to us all. The other shakes his head. They are our neighbours, he replies. We cannot abandon them. The crowd murmurs, murmurs divided. This is another consequence of the plague. It does not only affect bodies, it tests relationships, forcing people to choose between compassion and self-preservation. There are no easy answers, only difficult decisions. You do not intervene, your role is elsewhere. Instead, you continue on, the voices fading behind you. The clerk meets you at the end of the lane, his expression tense. They're talking of enforcing it, he says, keeping the sick inside, posting guards. You nod. It seems inevitable. The town cannot remain as it was. The old ways of living, of gathering, of moving freely are being replaced by something more cautious, more controlled. You adjust your satchel and look ahead. There are still more houses to visit, more lives to touch, however briefly, and the boundaries once drawn will only grow stronger. The argument fades behind you, but its echo lingers, as if the stones themselves have taken sides. You walk toward the church, again drawn not by comfort exactly, but by gravity. In times like this, everything seems to bend toward it. Bells people, questions, even silence. The church doors stand open. Inside, the air is cooler, touched with the steady scent of wax and old stone. Candles flicker in clusters, their light soft and uncertain, casting long shadows across the floor. The painted figures on the walls watch with calm expressions that do not change no matter what happens below them. You step inside your boots, quieter here, as if the building absorbs sound out of respect or habit. A small group has gathered near the altar. Some kneel, others stand hands clasped or resting against the wood of the pews. Their faces carry the same expression you have seen all day, a mixture of hope and resignation, as though they are asking for something while already preparing for the answer. The priest stands at the front, speaking softly. His voice is steady, practice shaped by years of guiding others through smaller troubles. This is not a smaller trouble. You move to the side, not wishing to interrupt and listen. He speaks of endurance of faith, of the idea that suffering has meaning even when it cannot be understood. It is a message people want to hear, even if they cannot fully accept it. Words become a kind of shelter, fragile but necessary. In this period, the church plays a central role in daily life, far beyond what many modern listeners might expect. It is not just a place of worship, but a source of guidance, authority, and community. Priests are often among the few figures people turn to in times of crisis, offering both spiritual comfort and practical support. You notice how close people stand to one another here despite everything. The habits of devotion are strong. Hands brush as candles are passed. Shoulders touch as prayers are murmured. The need for connection outweighs the fear, at least within these walls. A woman near the front begins to cry quietly. The sound is soft, but it spreads through the room, a ripple of emotion that others feel even if they do not show it. The priest pauses, then continues, his voice gentler now. You step back, giving them the space on their ears. Near the entrance, a man lights a candle and places it among the others. He lingers for a moment, watching the flame, then bows his head. There is something steadying about the act, simple and repeated countless times before. Ritual has a way of anchoring people when everything else feels uncertain. As you stand there, the priest's words drift toward you again. We must care for one another, he says, even now, especially now. It's a sentiment that feels both obvious and impossibly difficult. You think of the market doors, the arguments in the street, the families closing themselves off. Care now comes with risk. Every act of kindness carries a shadow. A young boy approaches you, his steps hesitant. Are you the doctor? He asks. You nod. He looks at you with a seriousness that does not belong on such a small face. My mother says you can help, he continues. Will you come? You glance toward the priest, who meets your eyes briefly and gives a small nod. There is no need for words. You both understand the rhythm of this work. Show me, you say. The boy leads you out of the church and into a side street, his pace quick but uneven. He looks back often as if to make sure you're still there. The trust he places in you feels heavier than any coin. As you follow, you notice the church bell begin to ring again. Not the steady toll of time, but a slower, more deliberate sound. It carries across the town, marking something that does not need to be named. Funeral bells. In many places during this time, church bells are used to signal deaths, their tones varying to indicate different events. The sound becomes a constant presence, a reminder that loss is no longer rare or distant. The boy leads you to a small house tucked between two larger ones. The door is open and voices spill out, urgent and overlapping. Inside, the scene is familiar now. A bed, a patient, a cluster of worried faces. Yet each one feels new, each story its own weight. You set down your satchel and begin again. As you work, you notice a small detail that catches your attention. Hanging near the bed is a strip of cloth marked with symbols drawn in dark ink. The shapes are uneven but deliberate. What is this? You ask quietly. The boy's mother glances at it. A blessing, she says, given by a traveller. He said it would protect us. You nod, though you do not recognize the symbols. Such things have become more common. Travellers bring not only goods, but ideas, remedies and beliefs from other places. Some are helpful, others less so, but all are taken in, considered and sometimes held onto with surprising strength. As you continue your work, you reflect on how the town is changing, not just in behaviour but in belief. Old ideas mix with new ones, creating a shifting landscape of understanding. People grasp at anything that might offer an explanation or a solution. The boy watches you closely, his eyes following every movement. Will she get better? He asks. You pause, meeting his gaze. We will do what we can, you say. He nods, though his expression does not change. Children learn quickly in times like these. When you finish, you give the family your instructions, repeating them carefully. Open the windows when possible. Keep the air moving, change linens, offer water, pray if they wish, do what can be done. It feels like a small list against a large problem. You step back into the street, once more the boy following you to the door. Thank you, he says softly. You nod, unsure what to say in return. As you walk away, the bell continues to toll its sound, steady and unyielding. It weaves through the streets, touching every corner of the town. You find yourself listening to it differently now, not just as a signal, but as a rhythm marking the passage of time in a way that feels both relentless and strangely comforting. Each toll is a moment. Each moment a step. You move through the town, your path shaped by need and chance, your role becoming clearer with each door you enter. The church fades behind you, but its presence lingers, a quiet anchor in a shifting world. Ahead, the streets stretch on, filled with stories you have yet to hear. And you keep walking. You follow the sound of your own footsteps now, steady and deliberate as the bell continues behind you, fading only slightly as you turn into the market district again. The town has not stopped moving, but it has changed its pace. Everything feels slower, measured, as if each action must now pass through a layer of thought before it is allowed to happen. The market that once hummed with bargaining and laughter now murmurs instead. You pass a butcher's stall where the cuts of meat are fewer than expected. The man behind the counter wipes his knife again and again, though it is already clean. His eyes flick to each customer, scanning faces for signs that cannot be easily seen. A woman offers coins from a distance, placing them carefully on the edge of the table, rather than handing them directly. He does the same when returning change. It is a small adjustment, but you notice it immediately. Contact is being reduced in quiet, almost unconscious ways. Nearby, a baker arranges loaves with less enthusiasm than usual. Bread is still essential, still one of the few constants in daily life. Yet even here there is strain. Grain supplies are uncertain. Fewer workers arrive to need to carry to tend ovens. Those who remain work longer, harder, with fewer hands to help. This is one of the visible effects already unfolding. Labour shortages begin to ripple through communities touched by the plague. When people fall ill or die, their roles do not vanish with them. Fields still need tending goods, still need moving food, still needs preparing. The absence becomes as noticeable as the presence once was. You pause near a stall selling dried goods. The merchant watches you approach, then quickly adjusts a cloth covering his wares, as if shielding them from something in the air. "Doctor," he says, his voice tight, "tell me, is it true it spreads by breath?" You consider the question. It may travel through the air, you reply carefully. Through foul vapours, some believe. He nods, though his expression does not ease. The idea of invisible danger unsettles people deeply. It offers no clear notar. I get to avoid beyond everything. I have begun sleeping in the back room, he says, away from the front. Fewer people pass there. You nod again. It is another small attempt to create distance, to carve out safety where none is guaranteed. As you move on, you notice something else. Prices have begun to shift. A woman argues softly with a merchant over the cost of onions. He shrugs, spreading his hands as if to say that the world itself has raised the price. It is not entirely untrue. With fewer workers and disrupted, trade goods become harder to obtain. Scarcity creeps in subtle at first, then more pronounced. You pass a group of labourers gathered near the edge of the square. They speak in low voices, glancing around as if their conversation might be overheard. They are offering more coin now, one says, for hauling, for digging. Another nods, because no one else will. There it is again. Opportunity even in crisis. As grim as it sounds, the imbalance of labour begins to shift power in small ways. Those who remain able to work may find themselves in demand, their efforts valued more highly than before. It is the change that will grow over time, though. Right now it feels almost inappropriate to notice. You continue walking, your senses adjusting to the altered rhythm of the market. The usual calls of vendors are quieter, less confident. The spaces between stalls seem wider, though they are not. People stand apart more often, leaving gaps where there used to be crowds. At the far end of the market, you come across a curious scene. A man stands on a crate not unlike the one you saw earlier, but instead of selling charms or objects, he is offering advice. His voice carries clearly, though he speaks without urgency. "Do not eat too much," he says. "Keep your body balanced. Avoid excess." A few people listen, nodding thoughtfully. Others pass by uninterested. He continues speaking of diet, of maintaining health through moderation. It is a concept rooted in the medical understanding of the time where balance within the body is considered essential to preventing illness. While it may not stop the plague, it reflects a broader attempt to make sense of health in uncertain conditions. You linger for a moment, then move on. Near the edge of the square, a woman sits alone, her hands folded in her lap. Before her lies a small collection of items, herbs, cloth, and a few simple tools. She does not call out to passers-by, but waits quietly. You approach, curious. She looks up, meeting your gaze with a calm expression. "I make poultices," she says, "for those who need them." You nod, recognizing the effort. Not everyone can visit the sick, but some find ways to contribute from a distance. Preparing remedies, however simple, becomes a form of participation, a way to feel useful. You purchase a small packet from her, adding it to your already burdened satchel. She thanks you with a slight incline of her head. As you turn to leave, she speaks again. They say it will pass, she says softly, that it cannot last forever. You pause. Everything passes, you reply. It is a truth, though not a comforting one in this moment. You continue through the market, the sounds blending into a low, constant hum. The town is not silent, not empty, but it is changed. Every interaction carries weight. Every exchange feels deliberate. At the edge of the square, you notice a cart being loaded with sacks of grain. 2 men work quickly, their movements efficient. A third stands nearby, watching the street. Where is it going, you ask as you pass. To the next town, one replies. If the road stays open, trade continues, though with uncertainty. Routes may close, travellers may be turned away, but for now, movement persists. It must. Without it, the town cannot sustain itself. You walk on your path, taking you through another street lined with modest homes. The doors here are closed, but not marked. Yet, the absence of marks does not mean the absence of illness. It simply means the pattern has not reached this part of the town fully, or that people here have chosen not to signal it. You check the list in your sleeve again. Fewer names remain for today, but the knowledge that more will be added tomorrow settles heavily. Your steps slow slightly as fatigue presses in. The day has stretched longer than expected, each visit blending into the next, yet each one remains distinct in its own way, each face, each voice, each room leaving an impression. You pause at a corner, taking a moment to steady yourself. The market noise fades behind you, replaced by the quieter sounds of residential life. A door creaks open, a pot is set down. A voice calls softly from within a house. Life continues. It always does. You adjust your grip on the satchel and move forward once more. Another house waits ahead. Another doorway to cross. And beyond it, another story unfolding in the dim light of a single candle. You step into the quieter stretch of street, leaving behind you the strained murmur of the market. Here the sounds are softer, more domestic, though no less heavy. A pot lid rattles somewhere inside a house. A child hums faintly, then stops as if remembering something. Even the wind seems to move more carefully, slipping between buildings rather than pushing through them. The next house on your list belongs to a man of some means the clerk had mentioned earlier. Not wealthy enough to be distant from the town's troubles, but comfortable enough that his affairs matter to others. You can tell as soon as you approach. The door is solid, well kept. The small window beside it is clean, the shutter only half closed. You knock. This time the door opens quickly, as though someone has been waiting for that exact sound. A servant greets you, her posture straight despite the tension in her face. She leads you inside without speaking, guiding you through a narrow hallway into a larger room than most you have entered today. The air is warmer here, scented faintly with beeswax and something sweet, perhaps dried fruit or wine. The man lies on a bed set slightly apart from the wall, propped up by cushions. His face is pale, but his eyes are alert. Around him stand 2 figures, likely family members, their expressions carefully controlled. You are the physician, he says, his voice measured. You incline your head. I'm monsieur. Okay, I'm here to assist you reply. He studies you for a moment as if weighing your presence. Then tell me, he continues, what becomes of my affairs if I do not recover? The question arrives without hesitation. This is another aspect of the plague that reveals itself quickly. Illness does not only threaten the body, it unsettles everything tied to a person's life. Property debts, obligations, promises. When death feels close, these matters rise to the surface with urgency. You glance at the others in the room. One of them, a woman, lowers her gaze slightly while the other watches you intently. You should make your wishes clear, you say. Speak them while you're able. He nods as if this confirms what he already knew. In many parts of Europe during this time, the sudden spread of disease leads to an increase in the making of wills and the settling of accounts. People seek to ensure that their belongings, however modest or substantial, pass according to their wishes. It is a practical response to uncertainty, one that reflects both personal concern and social responsibility. The man gestures weakly toward a small table beside the bed where a parchment and ink rest. I have begun, he says, but I would have it witnessed. You understand? Witnesses give weight to words, turning them into something that can be upheld even after the speaker is gone. "I will remain while you speak, you tell him." He nods again, then begins his voice steady but strained. He names his heirs, his debts, his instructions. The servant listens, her face composed, while the woman beside him occasionally adds a detail or corrects a point. It is a strange moment, both intimate and formal, as if life and death have agreed to share the same space for a time. You stand quietly observing. As he speaks, you notice a small object hanging near the bed. It is a ring tied to a cord suspended from a nail in the wall. It catches the light in a subtle way. "What is that?" you ask softly when there is a pause. The woman glances at it. "It is said to detect poison," she explains. "If it darkens, danger is near." You nod, though you know such objects are more symbolic than functional. Still, their presence reveals something about the way people think. Even before the plague, concerns about unseen threats existed. Now those concerns have simply shifted focus. The man finishes speaking, his breath uneven. You offer him water, which he accepts with a slight nod. The room falls quiet for a moment, the weight of his words settling around you. "Will it hold?" he asks, gesturing toward the parchment. "It will be remembered," you reply. It is not quite the same thing, but it is as close as you can come. You then turn your attention to his condition. The signs are familiar now, though no less troubling. Fever, weakness, the early stages of what you have begun to recognize as a pattern. You prepare what care you can offer, your movements practiced almost automatic. Cloth herbs instructions, the family watches, their hope cautious, their fear contained. As you work, you reflect on how illness reshapes priorities. In ordinary times, concerns about property and status might dominate a person's thoughts. Now they stand alongside more immediate questions: breath, pain, time. Before you leave, the man reaches out slightly. "If I recover," he says, "I will remember your service." You nod, though you do not dwell on the promise. Gratitude is a fragile thing in such moments, easily overshadowed by outcomes beyond your control. You step back into the hallway, the servant guiding you toward the door. "Thank you," she says quietly. You incline your head again, then step outside. The air feels cooler now, the light beginning to shift as the day moves toward evening. Shadows stretch longer across the street and the sounds of the town soften further. You pause for a moment, adjusting your satchel. The work you do is not only about tending to the sick, it is about witnessing the many ways people respond to the same threat. Some cling to routine, others prepare for departure. Some seek explanations, others focus on immediate tasks. Each approach is a form of coping, a way to navigate a situation that offers few clear answers. You walk on your steps slower now, the weight of the day settling into your muscles. The list in your sleeve is nearly complete for now, though you know it will grow again by morning. As you turn down another street, you notice a group gathered near a doorway, their voices low. You do not approach. There will be time for more visits tomorrow. For now, you allow yourself a brief pause. The town continues around you, quieter than before, but still alive. A candle is lit in a window. A door closes gently. Somewhere a lullaby begins soft and steady. You listen for a moment, then continue on. There is still more to face, but for now the day begins to draw to a close. And with it the weight of everything you have seen settles more deeply into your thoughts. The light has begun to soften into evening, and with it the town seems to exhale, though not in relief. More like a tired pause, a moment where even fear grows quiet from exhaustion. You return to your small room above the cooper's workshop, your steps slower now, each stair creaking under your weight, as if marking your return. Inside the room greets you with the same simple stillness. Straw bed, narrow window, the faint scent of wood and old ale rising from below. It should feel like safety. Instead, it feels like a place to set down your thoughts, which may be heavier than anything you carry in your satchel. You close the door and lean against it for a moment. Your hands still smell of vinegar herbs and the lingering warmth of human skin. You move to the basin and pour water, slowly watching the surface ripple. When you wash, you do so carefully, more deliberately than you might have days ago. Not because you fully understand what you're washing away, but because the act itself has taken on meaning. Cleanliness in this time is not absent, despite what later imagination sometimes suggests. People do wash, do care for their bodies and surroundings, though not with the knowledge of unseen organisms that would come centuries later. Water, cloth, and effort remain the tools you have. You dry your hands on a piece of linen and sit on the edge of the bed. The day returns to you in fragments. The first house, the stillness of the cottage, the marked doors, the boy in the church, each moment layered over the last, forming a kind of quiet weight that settles into your chest. You open your satchel and begin to sort through its contents. Herbs now fewer. Cloth some used, some still folded. The small tokens given to you throughout the day. The embroidered scrap, the pouch of dried plants, the charm tucked into the corner. You take them out one by one, placing them on the bed. They are simple objects, yet each carries a sturdier moment of connection. People offering what little they can in exchange for hope, or perhaps simply an acknowledgement of your presence. You pause holding the small pouch given to you earlier. It feels light, almost insignificant, yet you find yourself reluctant to set it aside. There is something about these items that speaks to the human need for protection, for reassurance. Even when their effectiveness is uncertain, they provide comfort, a sense that something is being done. You set the pouch down and reach for your cup, pouring a small amount of water. It tastes faintly of the wooden vessel, a subtle reminder of its age. As you sit there, the sounds of the town drift upward. A door closing, a voice calling out, the distant murmur of conversation. Life continues even as it changes. You think about the remedies you have used today. Poultices, cloths, instructions about air and cleanliness. These are the tools available to you, shaped by the medical understanding of your time. Treatments often focus on balancing the body's internal state, addressing what is believed to be an imbalance of humours. Bloodletting, for instance, is a common practice used in the belief that removing excess blood can restore balance. It is not always applied, and you have hesitated to use it today, uncertain of its benefit in these cases. Other methods include the use of herbal mixtures, dietary adjustments, and the management of environment. While some of these may offer minor relief, none provide a clear answer to the illness you face. This uncertainty is perhaps the most difficult aspect of your role. You are expected to act, to provide guidance, to offer solutions. Yet the knowledge you possess is limited, shaped by traditions that do not fully explain what is happening. Still you continue, because doing nothing is not an option. You lean back slightly, resting your hands on the bed. In the quiet of your room, you allow yourself a moment of reflection. What is it that you truly offer? Not a cure, that much is clear. Perhaps it is presence, the willingness to enter spaces others avoid, to listen, to provide some measure of structure in a situation that feels chaotic. There is value in that, even if it is not the value people hope for. A faint knock at your door interrupts your thoughts. You sit up, your body tensing slightly. Who is it you call? The clerk comes a reply. You rise and open the door. He stands there, his expression drawn but composed. There are more names, he says, holding up the tablet. Of course there are. You nod, stepping aside to let him in. He moves into the room, glancing briefly at the items laid out on your bed. You've been busy, he observes. Yes, you reply simply. He sets the tablet down on the small table and points to the new marks. These came in this afternoon, he explains. Some from the outer streets, others from near the square. You study the list, noting the growing number of entries. The pattern is spreading, not rapidly, not yet, but steadily enough to be noticed. The clerk watches you, as if waiting for some reaction. There will be more tomorrow, he says quietly. You meet his gaze. Yes, you agree. He hesitates, then speaks again. Do you think it will worsen? It's a question you have heard in different forms throughout the day. You consider your answer. It may, you say, or it may change in ways we do not yet understand. He nods slowly, absorbing your words. There is a pause, a moment where neither of you speaks. Then he turns to leave. Rest while you can, he says. You offer a small nod in return. After he departs, you close the door once more and return to your seat. The room feels quieter now, though the weight of the day remains. You gather the items from your bed and place them back into your satchel, organizing them carefully. It is a small act of control, a way to prepare for what comes next. As you lie down, the straw beneath you rustles softly. Your body aches, your mind still active despite the fatigue. Outside, the town settles into night. The bell does not ring for a time. In that silence, you find a brief moment of rest. Not peace exactly, but something close enough. Sleep does not arrive cleanly. It comes in fragments, shallow and uncertain, like a traveller who cannot decide whether to stay. You drift, then wake. Drift again, then surface at the smallest sound. A cart passing below, a cough somewhere in the street, the creak of wood settling in the night. When morning finally presses its pale light through your narrow window, you feel as though you have been awake the entire time. You sit up slowly, your body stiff, your thoughts already turning toward the day ahead. The satchel waits where you left it, its contents ordered, prepared, though no arrangement can fully prepare you for what you will find beyond each door. Outside the town stirs again. You step into the street, the air cool and damp, carrying the scent of morning fires and something sharper beneath it. The usual rhythm of waking has shifted. People move with purpose but less ease. Conversations are shorter, glances linger longer, and the rumours have grown. You hear them almost immediately. Near the square, a group has gathered, their voices low but urgent. You pass close enough to catch fragments. "It was brought here," one man insists, from outside. "Trays, travellers." Another shakes his head. "No, it began among us. A punishment." A third voice cuts in. They say it comes from poisoned wells, that someone has done this. The words ripple through the group, each suggestion feeding the next. Fear has begun to take shape in stories, and those stories are spreading quickly. You continue walking, but the voices follow you in memory. When people cannot see the cause of something, they search for explanations they can hold on to. Sometimes those explanations lead to dangerous conclusions. Suspicion grows. Blame finds targets, whether deserved or not. In some places during this time, entire groups of people are accused of causing the plague, leading to acts of violence that add further tragedy to an already devastating situation. Fear does not always choose wisely. You turn down a side street, hoping for quieter ground, but the whispers are there as well, carried in hushed conversations behind half-closed doors. At the apothecary's stall, you find him already at work, his hands moving quickly as he prepares small packets of herbs. "You hear them?" he asks, without looking up. "Yes," you reply. He sighs, tying off a bundle with practiced fingers. "They come asking for remedies, but also for answers," he says. "And when I cannot give them, they look elsewhere." You nod. It is not only medicine that is in demand, it is certainty. He glances up at you briefly. "Be careful," he adds. "Not all questions are safe to answer." You understand his meaning. You continue on your path, taking you toward another part of the town. The streets here are narrower, the houses closer together. The air feels heavier, as if it has not moved freely in some time. You notice more doors marked now, not just one or two, but several each bearing a sign of warning. Cloth tied to handles, symbols scratched into wood, small indicators that something within is not as it should be. The pattern you saw yesterday is becoming more pronounced. At one such house you pause. Voices come from inside, raised and tense. You knock, and the sound seems to cut through the argument. The door opens quickly, revealing a man with a flushed face and wide eyes. "You should not be here," he says. "You've heard this before." "And yet I am you," reply. He hesitates, then steps aside. Inside the room is crowded, more so than any you have entered so far. Several people stand close together, their voices overlapping in frustration. "She should be moved," one insists, where another counters. "There is nowhere to take her." A third voice rises. "We cannot stay here if she remains." The tension is thick, almost tangible, says Alberto. You move toward the bed where a woman lies, her breathing uneven. The others fall silent as you approach, their attention shifting to you. You begin your work, asking questions, examining, preparing what little care you can offer. The routine is familiar now, though no less difficult. As you work, the argument resumes in quieter tones. The issue is not just the illness itself, but what to do about it. Where should the sick go? Who should care for them? How can others be protected? These questions do not have easy answers. In some regions, authorities begin establishing designated spaces for the sick, often referred to as pest houses or isolation wards. These are places where those afflicted can be separated from the healthy population, though conditions within them vary widely. The idea is simple: contain the illness, limit its spread. In practice, it's far more complicated. You finish your preparations and turn to the group. "She must be kept comfortable," you say, "and the room should be aired." A man near the door shakes his head. "We cannot open the windows," he insists. "The air outside is worse." You consider your response. "Stale air within can do harm as well," you say. He does not look convinced, but he does not argue further. As you baptized one of your things, a woman approaches you, her expression anxious. They say if you carry certain words written on parchment, it will protect you, she says. Is it true? You pause. There are many such beliefs circulating now. Written charms, prayers carried close to the body, phrases repeated at specific times. They may bring comfort, you reply gently. She nods, though her uncertainty remains. Before you leave, you notice something else. Near the doorway, a small bowl has been placed, filled with a mixture of substances that emit a strong odour. Herbs, perhaps, combined with something less pleasant. What is this, you ask? The man who opened the door earlier gestures toward it. A mixture from a traveller, he explains. He said the smell would keep the illness away. You nod, recognizing the pattern once more. Strong scents, protective measures, attempts to influence the unseen. You step back into the street, the air feeling almost fresh in comparison. As you walk away, the sounds of the argument fade, replaced by the quieter murmur of the town. The rumours continue to circulate, growing and shifting as they pass from person to person. Each telling adds a new detail, a new theory, a new layer of fear. You realise that the illness is not the only thing spreading. Ideas move just as quickly, shaping behaviour, influencing decisions, sometimes helping, sometimes harming. You pause at a corner, taking a moment to steady yourself. The day has only just begun, and already the weight of it presses against you. You adjust your satchel and continue on. There are more houses to visit, more voices to hear, and more stories unfolding in the spaces between certainty and fear. By the time you reach the edge of the town again, the air feels different from the crowded streets behind you. It carries a faint chill mixed with the scent of earth and something medicinal, though you cannot quite place it. The clerk walks beside you in silence, his usual stream of small remarks replaced by a tight, thoughtful quiet. You will see, he says, finally nodding ahead. At first you do not understand what he means. Then you see the building. It stands slightly apart from the rest, a long, low structure with a roof that dips unevenly in the middle. The walls are plain, hastily repaired in places, and the door is wide enough to allow more than one person to pass through at a time. There are no markings on it, no symbols or warnings, but its purpose is clear from the way people avoid walking too close. A pest house, or at least the beginnings of one. You slow your steps. This is new for the town, though not entirely unfamiliar in concept. In times of widespread illness, some communities attempt to gather the sick in one place, separating them from the rest of the population. It is a practical idea born from observation rather than precise knowledge. When the ill are kept apart, fewer others seem to fall sick, at least in some cases. Whether this always works is another matter. You approach the door with the clerk, who hesitates only briefly before stepping aside to let you enter first. Inside, the air is thick and warm, carrying a mixture of scents that immediately settle into your senses. Sweat damp, straw, herbs, and something heavier beneath it all. The space is dimly lit by a few candles placed along the walls, their light flickering over rows of pallets laid out across the floor. People lie on them, some still, some shifting slightly, some murmuring words that do not quite form sentences. A woman moves between them, carrying a bucket of water. Her steps are careful, her expression focused. She glances at you as you enter, then returns to her task without pause. You stand there for a moment, taking it in. This is different from the individual houses you have visited. There each room held its own story, its own small world of worry and care. Here those worlds have been gathered together, overlapping, blending into something larger and more overwhelming. You step further inside. The clerk remains near the door, his presence uncertain. This is not his domain. It barely feels like anyone's. You move from pallet to pallet, observing, listening. Some of the patients respond when you speak, their voices weak but present. Others do not stir at all. You kneel beside one man, his face drawn, his breathing shallow. How long has he been here, you ask the woman with the bucket as she passes. 2 days, she replies, perhaps 3. It is hard to keep track. Her voice is steady, though her eyes betray fatigue. Who tends to them, you ask? Whoever can, she says, those who are able, those who have not yet fallen ill. You nod understanding. Care here is shared, improvised. There are no formal attendants, no trained staff dedicated solely to this place. Instead, it is sustained by those willing to remain within it despite the risk. You continue your rounds, offering what assistance you can. A cloth adjusted here, a few words spoken there, instructions repeated quietly to those who listen. It feels both necessary and insufficient. Near the far wall, you notice a man sitting upright, his back against the wood. He watches you as you approach, his gaze sharp despite his condition. "You are the doctor," he says. You incline your head. "I am here to help." He gives a small dry laugh. "Help," he repeats. "We could use that." There is no bitterness in his tone, only a kind of weary acknowledgement. You kneel beside him. "What have you seen?" he asks. You consider the question. "Many things," you reply, enough to know that this is not simple. He nods slowly. "They brought me here to protect my family," he says. "Or so they said." His eyes drift toward the door. "I hope they are safe." You do not respond immediately. There is little you can offer in the way of reassurance. "I hope so too," you say finally. He leans his head back against the wall, closing his eyes briefly. As you move on, you notice a small arrangement near one of the pallets. A bundle of herbs tied with string placed carefully beside a patient's head. Nearby, a small object carved from wood rests on the floor, its shape unclear but deliberate. People continue to bring these items even here. Even in a place defined by illness, the instinct to protect comfort remains strong. One of the more unusual practices you observe is a small group of patients wearing cloth soaked in vinegar over their noses and mouths. The sharp scent fills the air around them. This method is believed by some to filter harmful elements from the air, creating a barrier between the body and whatever carries the disease. It's not entirely effective, but it reflects an attempt to engage with the problem using the tools available. You pause near the centre of the room, taking in the scene once more. The pest house represents a shift in how the town responds to the illness. It is no longer confined to individual households. It has become a collective challenge requiring collective solutions. There is ongoing discussion among those who study this period about how effective such measures were. Some suggest that isolating the sick may have slowed the spread in certain areas, while others point out that the conditions within these spaces could also contribute to further illness. From where you stand, the answer feels less important than the effort itself. The town is trying. That matters even if the outcome remains uncertain. You make your way back toward the door, the clerk stepping forward as you approach. "Well," he asks quietly. "It is necessary," you reply, but it is not enough." He nods, though his expression remains troubled. Outside, the air feels cooler, lighter, though the weight of what you have seen lingers. You take a moment to breathe, to let the sounds of the town return to you. A distant cart, a voice calling out, the faint rustle of leaves. Life continues even here. You turn back towards the streets, your path leading you once more into the heart of the town. There is still work to be done, and the day is far from over. By the time you leave the pest house behind, the light has shifted again, leaning toward afternoon. The town feels heavier now, as if the hours themselves carry weight. You walk more slowly, not from reluctance, but from the steady pull of fatigue settling into your limbs. The streets are not empty, but movement has thinned. People step carefully around one another. Conversations happen in shorter bursts, often cut off mid-sentence. Even the animals seem subdued. A dog lies curled in a doorway watching without barking. A horse stands still at its tether, head lowered, as though it too senses something beyond its understanding. You return to your room, briefly drawn by the need to pause. Inside, the space feels unchanged, though you are not. The same straw bed, the same narrow window, the same faint smell of wood and dust. Yet now it holds the quiet echo of everything you have seen. You close the door and lean against it again just for a moment. Your hands feel different today. Not physically, perhaps, but in the way you notice them. What they have touched. Who they have touched. The thought lingers longer than you would like. You move to the basin and wash once more. Slowly, carefully. The water cool against your skin, the cloth rough, but grounding. You scrub as if effort alone might create certainty. It does not, but it helps. You sit down and remove your satchel, placing it beside you. For a while you simply breathe, letting the stillness of the room settle around you. This is where the other part of your work begins. Not the walking, the speaking, the tending, but the waiting. The private moments when you're alone with your thoughts and they begin to ask questions you cannot easily answer. What if you are carrying the illness at yourself? The thought arrives quietly, but it does not leave. You replay the day in your mind, the rooms, the faces, the brief touches, the air thick with breath and heat. Each moment now carries a new layer of meaning. You check your own body almost without thinking. A slight warmth in your skin, a heaviness in your limbs. Is it fatigue or something else? You cannot be sure. And that uncertainty is its own burden. In times like these, those who care for the sick often find themselves caught between duty and fear. You must go where others hesitate, yet in doing so you place yourself at risk. There is no clear boundary, no point at which you can say you're safe. Some practitioners attempt to protect themselves through routine, washing, changing clothes, carrying certain items believed to guard against illness. Others rely on prayer, on habit, on sheer determination. You find yourself doing all of these not because you believe fully in any one method, but because each offers a small measure of control. You reach into your satchel and take out the small tokens you have collected. The embroidered cloth, the pouch of herbs, the charm wrapped in parchment. You hold them briefly one by one. They are not protection in any measurable sense, yet they carry something else. A connection to the people who gave them. A reminder that you are not entirely alone in this. You set them aside and lie back on the bed staring at the ceiling. The wood above you is rough, marked by time and use. You trace the patterns with your eyes, letting your thoughts drift. There is a moment, brief but noticeable, where your breathing slows, the tension in your body eases slightly, and then, as if on cue, a sound rises from outside. A cart, not the usual kind moving goods or supplies. This one moves more slowly. You sit up. The wheels creak against the stones, a sound you're beginning to recognize. It carries a different rhythm, a different weight. You move to the window and look out. Below, two men guide a cart through the street. It is covered with cloth, but the shape beneath is uneven. Not sacks, not barrels. People step aside as it passes, some turning away, others watching in silence. There are no voices raised, no announcements made. The cart moves on its purpose understood without explanation. In many towns during this time, the handling of the dead becomes increasingly difficult. As numbers grow, traditional practices shift. Burials may happen more quickly sometimes with less ceremony than before. The need to manage the practical aspects of death begins to outweigh the rituals that once accompanied it. You step back from the window. The room feels smaller now. You sit again, your thoughts turning inward once more. What is your place in all of this? You are not a priest, though you witness final moments. Not a labourer, though your work is physical. Not a ruler, though your presence carries authority in certain spaces. You exist somewhere between roles, moving through them as needed. It's a strange position, both central and isolated. You lie back once more, closing your eyes briefly. Sleep does not come, but rest does in small increments. Outside, the town continues its quiet struggle. Inside, you gather what strength you can, because soon you will rise again and step back into it. When you rise again, the light has shifted toward late afternoon, casting a softer glow across the narrow streets. It does not warm much, but it gentles the edges of things. You step back outside your body, reluctant but obedient. Your satchel once again slung over your shoulder like a quiet promise you are not entirely sure you can keep. The town feels altered again, not dramatically. No sudden silence or visible collapse, but something subtler, a thinning, as though the threads that hold daily life together have loosened just enough for you to notice. You walk toward a quieter quarter, one you have not yet visited. The houses here are smaller, closer together with low doors and uneven roofs. Laundry hangs from lines unmoving in the still air. A wooden toy lies abandoned near a doorway. No child nearby to claim it. That is the first thing you notice, the absence of children. Not entirely gone, but fewer in sight. Those who remain are kept indoors more often or watched closely when they may step outside. You pass a window where two small faces peer through the gap in the shutters. They disappear the moment they see you looking. You continue on. At the end of the lane, you hear a sound that does not quite fit the rhythm of the town. Not the creak of wheels or the murmur of voices. Crying, soft, steady and alone. You follow it. It leads you to a doorway left slightly open. Inside the room is dim, the air still. A young girl sits on the floor near the hearth, her knees drawn to her chest. She cannot be more than 8 years old. Her hair is uncombed, her face streaked with tears that have dried and begun again. She looks up when you enter. For a moment, neither of you speaks. "Where is your family?" you ask gently. She hesitates, then gestures vaguely toward the back of the room. You move carefully past her. There on a pallet lies a woman. Still, too still. You pause, letting the silence settle. There is no need to check, you already understand. You return to the front of the room, where the girl watches you with wide, uncertain eyes. She is sleeping, she says, though her voice carries no conviction. You kneel beside her. "What is your name?" you ask. "Anna," she replies. You nod. "Anna," you say softly. "Is there anyone else who can come? A neighbour? A friend?" She shakes her head. "No one comes," she says. The words land heavily. This is another quiet consequence of the plague. When fear takes hold, even the bonds of community begin to strain. People hesitate to enter homes where illness has been, not from cruelty, but from self-preservation. Still, it leaves moments like this. A child alone in a room that feels too large. You glance around, taking in the small details. A cup left half full on the table, a piece of bread untouched, a blanket folded neatly at the foot of the bed as if someone had planned for rest that never came. You stand slowly. "I will find someone," you tell her. She nods, though her expression remains uncertain. You step back outside, the air feeling sharper now. The lane is quiet, but not empty. A woman stands at the far end, watching. She steps back slightly when she sees you approach, her hand tightening on the edge of her shawl. "There is a child," you say, "inside alone." The woman hesitates. "I cannot," she replies. "My husband is ill. I must not risk it." You nod, understanding, even as it weighs on you. Further along, you find another neighbour, an older man leaning on a stick. He listens as you explain, his face drawn. "I will send word," he says finally, "to the parish. They will know what to do." It is not immediate help, but it is something. In many places during this time, the care of those left without family becomes a growing concern. Orphans in particular begin to appear in greater numbers, their futures uncertain. Some are taken in by extended family or neighbours. Others are placed under the care of religious institutions or local authorities, depending on what resources remain. You return briefly to the doorway and kneel once more beside Anna. "Someone will come," you tell her. She nods again, her small hands gripping the fabric of her dress. "Will you come back?" she asks. You pause. There are so many places you must go. So many people who need you. "I will try, and he's always there. I will try," you say. It is not a promise, but it is honest. You step away, the sound of her quiet breathing following you into the street. As you walk, you notice more signs of absence. A shop closed that was open yesterday. A window left unlatched. A cart standing unattended. The town is not empty, but it is thinning. You pass a group of women gathered near a well, their voices low. They speak of families who have left, of others who have been taken to the pest house of children, now staying with distant relatives. Life continues, but it is shifting, adapting in ways both visible and unseen. You pause near the edge of the lane, taking a moment to steady yourself. The weight of what you have seen settles more deeply. It is not only the illness itself, it is what remains after. The spaces left behind. The quiet rooms. The unanswered questions. You adjust your satchel and continue on. There are still others who need you, still more doors to open, still more stories unfolding in the fading light, and as you walk, the town stretches out before you, familiar and unfamiliar all at once. A place you are beginning to know, a place that is changing with each passing hour. The sky leans toward evening again, that soft dimming that seems almost kind compared to the sharper light of day. You find the clerk waiting near the square, his tablet tucked under his arm, as though it has grown heavier since morning. He raises his hand when he sees you, relief flickering across his face for a moment before it settles back into weariness. "They need you," he says, though the words feel almost unnecessary now. "They always need you." He leads you not to another house, but toward the Guildhall once more. The same building where questions were asked yesterday now feels different, its doorway a place where decisions gather rather than disperse. Inside, the air is thick again, though the men standing within seem quieter than before. Fewer voices compete, more eyes watch. A table has been cleared, and upon it lies a larger sheet of parchment weighted at the corners by small stones. Names, or rather marks that stand for names. The clerk steps forward and begins to transfer the symbols from his tablet onto the larger record. Each movement of his stylus is careful, deliberate, as though pressing too hard might make the reality beneath it worse. You stand beside him, observing. This is another part of the town's response, not treatment, not prevention, but accounting. A need to record what is happening, to give shape to loss through ink and memory. In some cities, especially in parts of Italy, officials begin keeping detailed records of deaths during outbreaks, creating early forms of public health documentation. These records would later help historians understand the scale of events, though at the time they served a more immediate purpose. They allowed communities to track patterns, to see where the illness moved, and perhaps to feel a small measure of control over something vast. Here the system is simpler, less precise, but the intention is the same. How many, you ask quietly? The clerk does not look up. More than yesterday, he replies. It is not a number, but it is an answer. Around the room the council members speak in low tones. Their concerns have shifted slightly. Yesterday they asked what could be done. Today they ask how to manage what is already happening. We must assign men to the doors, one says. Those marked must remain inside. And who will enforce this? Another counters. We have fewer men each day. A third gestures toward the parchment. If we do nothing, it will worsen. Their words circle the same problem from different angles. Containment. Not a perfect solution, but one that feels within reach. You listen, saying little. Your role here is not to decide policy, yet your presence lends weight to the discussion. They look to you occasionally as if hoping for confirmation. Will it help? One finally asks you directly. You consider your response. Keep quiet. It may slow the spread, you say, if followed carefully. It is a measured answer, neither promise nor refusal. He nods as though this is enough. Across the room another man speaks, his voice quieter but firm. We must also consider the fields, he says. If fewer remain to work, then what then? The question hangs in the air. The illness does not only affect the present, it reaches forward into the coming seasons. Crops must be planted. Harvests must be gathered. Without them, the consequences will extend far beyond this moment. Already there are signs of strain. Fewer hands to tend the land, fewer workers to carry goods. The balance between supply and need begins to shift, sometimes in subtle ways, sometimes more sharply. You think back to the labourers in the market. Speaking of increased wages, it is an early sign of change, one that will grow more pronounced over time. As populations decline, the value of labour can rise, altering social structures in ways that few here fully anticipate. But for now, the focus remains The clerk finishes his work and steps back, wiping his hands on his tunic as though the act of writing has left something behind. What do we do with those who refuse to remain inside, he asks. The room falls silent. It is a difficult question. Enforcement requires force requires people willing to use it. We persuade them, one man suggests. And if persuasion fails, another asks. No one answers. You shift your weight slightly, the wooden floor creaking beneath you. This is where fear begins to shape authority. Decisions made not from certainty, but from urgency. The lines between protection and control blur, sometimes unnoticed. You step closer to the table, looking at the marks on the parchment. Each one represents a life, a household, a story. Together they form a pattern, though one that is still incomplete. Continue to record, you say quietly. It will help you see where it moves. The clerk nods, taking in your words. There is a brief pause. Then the council begins to disperse, each man returning to his own responsibilities. The room empties slowly, leaving you and the clerk alone once more. He looks at the parchment, then at you. Do you think we will remember this? He asks. The question is unexpected. You consider it. Yes, you say, in one way or another. Memory does not always preserve details, but it holds on to impressions, feelings, stories, lessons, even if they are not fully understood. He nods, though his expression remains distant. You step outside together, the air cooler now as evening settles in. The sky has taken on a deeper hue, the light fading gradually. The town continues its quiet rhythm. A door closes. A voice calls out softly. Somewhere a bell rings, once then stops. You walk a short distance before parting ways with the clerk. I will see you tomorrow, he says. You nod. Yes, you reply. Tomorrow. It feels both certain and uncertain at once. You make your way back toward your room, your steps slower now, the day's weight settling fully into your body. The satchel at your side feels heavier, though its contents have not changed. As you climb the stairs once more, the familiar creak of the wood greets you. Inside the room waits unchanged. You close the door behind you and set your satchel down. For a moment, you simply stand there listening to the quiet. The town beyond continues, but here there is a pause, a brief space between one day and the next. You sit, then lie back, the straw shifting beneath you. Your eyes close, not in sleep, not yet, but in rest. Morning arrives without ceremony. No gentle easing into the day, no gradual stirring of ordinary sounds. Instead, you wake already aware, as if your body has decided there is no longer time for slow beginnings. The air in your room feels colder, or perhaps you notice it more. You sit up, pressing your hands briefly against your face, grounding yourself in the familiar shape of your own breath. You're still here. For now, that is enough. Outside, the town has shifted again. You step into the street and immediately sense a difference. Not in noise or movement, but in appearance. People have begun to change how they present themselves, small adjustments at first glance, but meaningful when you look closer. Cloths tied more tightly over mouths, sleeves pulled longer, gloves where none were worn before, layers added not for warmth but for distance. Protection is becoming visible. As you walk toward the square, you notice a man adjusting a long coat, its sleeves extending past his wrists. Another carries a staff, using it to gesture rather than stepping too close when speaking. A woman passes with a bundle of herbs held near her face, inhaling their scent as though it might shield her. These are not yet the elaborate garments that later generations will associate with plague doctors, but the idea is forming. The concept of creating a barrier between the body and the world is taking shape in practical, improvised ways. You reach the apothecary's stall and find him busy more so than usual. Several people wait, each and holding coins, cloth or small containers. They ask for stronger things now, he says, as you approach, his hands moving quickly. What kind of things, you ask? He gestures toward a set of items laid out behind him. Thicker cloth, oils, anything that might keep the air from touching them directly. You nod. The belief that illness travels through the air has led to an increased focus on creating barriers, both physical and sensory. People seek ways to filter, block, or alter the air they breathe, even if the methods are imperfect. He hands you a small vial. Try this, he says, a mixture of herbs and vinegar, strong enough to notice. You take it, uncorking it briefly. The scent is sharp, almost overwhelming, but not unpleasant. It clears your senses in an immediate way. Thank you, you say, tucking it into your satchel. As you turn to leave, you catch sight of something that gives you pause. A man walks through the square wearing a long cloak, his face partially covered by a cloth that extends outward, slightly stuffed with something beneath. It is not the full-beaked mask that later centuries will remember, but it hints at the same idea. A protrusion filled with herbs designed to filter the air before it reaches the nose. You watch him pass, noting the way others step aside, giving him space not only out of caution, but perhaps also curiosity. The image lingers in your mind. The iconic beaked mask, often associated with plague doctors, becomes more prominent in later outbreaks, particularly in the 17th century. However, the underlying concept of using scent-filled coverings to protect against harmful air has earlier roots, evolving over time into more recognizable forms. You continue walking, your thoughts turning over this development. Clothing as protection. It is a logical step given the understanding of the time. If the air carries danger, then creating a barrier between the body and the air might offer some measure of safety. You find yourself adjusting your own garments slightly, pulling your cloak closer, tying the cloth over your nose more securely. It is a small act, but one that feels significant. Further along, you encounter the clerk once more. He looks at you then, at the cloth covering your face, and nods. Perhaps we should all do the same, he says. Perhaps, you reply. He hesitates, then adds, they're asking whether you will wear something more visible. You raise an eyebrow. Visible? A sign, he explains, so people know who you are, so they can find you. You consider this. It is an interesting idea. A way to identify yourself, not just by role, but by appearance. In a town where fear and uncertainty blur distinctions, a clear, visual marker could provide some reassurance. I will think on it, you say. He nods. Accepting your answer. As you move through the streets, you begin to notice more variations in dress. Some practical, others more symbolic. A man wears a scarf soaked in vinegar, its ends trailing down his chest. A woman wraps her hands in cloth before touching anything outside her home. A child imitates the adults, covering his face with a scrap of fabric that barely stays in place. These changes are not coordinated, not mandated, but they spread nonetheless. People observe one another, adopting what seems to work, discarding what does not. It's a form of adaptation driven by observation rather than certainty. You pause near the edge of the square, watching the flow of movement. The town is learning in its own way, not through clear instruction but through trial, error, and shared experience. You adjust your satchel again, feeling the weight of the vial within it. A small addition, but one that represents a larger shift. You are no longer just entering rooms and offering care. You are becoming part of a visible response, a figure shaped by the needs and fears of the community. It is not a role you sought, but it is one you now carry. As you turn toward the next street, you catch your reflection briefly in a small piece of polished metal hanging outside a stall. The cloth over your face, the cloak drawn close, the satchel at your side. You look different. Not dramatically medical. Naturally, but enough. You continue walking, your steps steady. The town stretches out before you, altered yet familiar, each corner holding something new. And as you move forward, the shape of your role becomes clearer, defined not only by what you do, but by how you're seen. The streets feel strangely settled today. Not calmer exactly, but steadier in their unease, as if the town has accepted a rhythm it did not choose. You walk with a quieter step now, no longer pausing at every new sound. The bells still ring, the doors still close, the smoke still drifts, but something beneath it all has shifted from shock to endurance. People are adjusting. You notice it in small ways first. A baker works alone where 3 once stood, his movements efficient practiced. He does not waste time looking up at passers-by. A woman carries 2 baskets instead of 1, her shoulders set with determination. A boy no older than 10 hauls a bundle of sticks twice his size, stopping only briefly to catch his breath before continuing. Roles are changing. Where one person falls away, another steps forward, not because they are ready, but because there is no one else to do it. This quiet rearrangement is happening everywhere. In the fields beyond the town, fewer workers bend over the soil, yet the work continues. Crops must be planted, tended, gathered. Hunger does not wait for illness to pass. In the workshops, apprentices take on tasks once reserved for masters. In homes, children learn responsibilities earlier than they should. The structure of daily life bends but does not break. You pass the market again and see that it has adapted as well. Stalls are spaced slightly farther apart. Transactions are quicker, more deliberate. Some vendors now leave goods on tables for customers to take, reducing the need for close contact. Payment is placed beside the items rather than handed directly. It's not perfect, but it's something. You pause near a stall where a man sells simple tools. He greets you with a nod, then returns to sharpening a blade. Fewer customers, he says without looking up, but those who come, they buy more. You tilt your head slightly. Why is that? He shrugs. They do not know when they will return, or if they will. You nod, understanding. Uncertainty changes behavior. People begin to plan differently, thinking not just of today, but of what might come next. As you move on, you notice another shift. Conversation. Where once people spoke freely in groups, now discussions are smaller, more contained. 2 or 3 at a time, standing apart, voices low. Information travels, but in quieter ways, passed carefully from one person to another. You overhear fragments as you walk. They say the worst has passed in another town. No, they say it has only begun there. My cousin writes that fewer are falling ill now, but more are dying. The stories contradict one another, yet they serve a purpose. They offer a sense of connection, a reminder that this experience is not isolated. Other places are facing the same struggle, finding their own ways to endure. You continue towards the edge of the town where the fields begin. The air here feels different. Cleaner perhaps, though you know the illness does not respect such boundaries. Still, the open space offers a sense of relief. A small group of workers tends to a plot of land, their movement slow but steady. You watch for a moment as they dig plant and cover, repeating the same motions again and again. One of them notices you and straightens, wiping his brow. "Doctor," he calls out, "will we have a harvest?" You consider the question. "Yes," you say, though it may be smaller. He nods, accepting this. It is enough. Hope, even in modest form, carries weight. You turn back toward the town, your thoughts lingering on what you have seen. Adaptation is not dramatic. It does not arrive with clear markers or declarations. It happens quietly in the choices people make each day, in the way they adjust their routines, their expectations, their understanding of what's possible. You pass a group of women gathered outside a house, their hands busy with cloth and thread. They work together, speaking softly, their movements synchronized in a way that suggests familiarity. "What are you making?" you ask as you approach. "Coverings," one replies, holding up a piece of fabric shaped to fit over the face. "For those who must go out." You nod. Another small change. Another layer of response. They offer you one and you accept it, tying it over your existing cloth. It feels thicker, more substantial. Whether it offers real protection is uncertain, but it adds to the growing sense of preparedness. You thank them and continue on. As you walk, you reflect on how the town has moved from reaction to adaptation. The initial shock has given way to a more sustained effort to manage the situation. It is not orderly. It is not fully understood, but it is persistent. You reach the square once more where the clerk stands reviewing his tablet. He looks up as you approach. "Fewer new marks today," he says. You raise an eyebrow slightly. "Fewer." He nods. "Only a few." It is a small detail, but one that catches your attention. Patterns are difficult to read in such circumstances, but even a slight change can feel significant. "Perhaps it is slowing," he adds, though his tone carries caution. "Perhaps," you reply. Neither of you is ready to believe it fully. Still, the possibility lingers. You stand there for a moment, watching the movement around you. The town continues. Change, certainly. Strained undeniably, but still functioning, still alive. You adjust your satchel and prepare to move on. There are still those who need you. Still doors to open. Still stories unfolding. And as you walk forward, you carry with you the quiet knowledge that even in the midst of uncertainty, people find ways to endure. Not perfectly, not without loss, but with a kind of steady resilience that shapes the days ahead. You begin to notice it before anyone dares to say it aloud. The bell rings less often. Not silence, not yet, but the intervals stretch. Where once the toll came again and again, close enough that the sound seemed to live in your bones, now there are pauses long enough for other noises to return. A cart rolling with ordinary purpose. A door opening without hesitation. A voice calling across a street without dropping to a whisper. You do not trust it at first. After so many days shaped by constant loss, any change feels suspect, like a trick of the senses. You move through the town with the same careful attention, watching for signs that might confirm or deny what you think you're seeing. Fewer marked doors. Not none, but fewer. Some shutters are open again just slightly, enough to let in air, enough to suggest that those inside feel less pressed to seal themselves away. A woman sweeps her doorway, pushing dust and straw into the street with a motion that feels almost defiant. You pass the apothecary's stall and find him leaning back, for once his hand still. "Quiet morning," he says. You glance around. "Yes," you reply. He nods, though his expression remains cautious. "I have seen this before," he adds, a slowing, but it can return. You understand his meaning. The illness does not follow a simple path. It rises, falls, shifts. What appears to be an end may only be a pause. Still, the change is there. In several regions during the Great Outbreak, waves of sickness did not strike evenly. Some towns experienced a sharp surge followed by a gradual decline, while others faced repeated flare-ups. The pattern varied, shaped by movement density and factors no one at the time could fully grasp. You continue through the market, noticing how people respond to this subtle shift. They are cautious but hopeful. A merchant arranges his goods with more care, as if preparing for customers who may soon return. A group of children plays at the edge of the square, their laughter, tentative at first, then growing stronger. An older man sits outside his home watching the street with a look that is almost reflective. Life begins to stretch outward again. You walk toward the church, drawn once more by its steady presence. Inside, the candles burn as they always have, but the number of people has changed. Fewer gathered in tight clusters. More space between them. Some stand quietly, not in urgent prayer, but in something closer to contemplation. The priest speaks softly, his tone different now. Less urgent, more measured. You take a place near the back, listening. He speaks of endurance, of survival, of the importance of remembering those who have been lost. His words do not carry the same weight of immediate fear, but they do not dismiss it either. Instead, they seem to hold it, gently acknowledging without overwhelming. As you stand there, you notice a small detail. A window has been opened, just a crack but enough to let in a thread of fresh air. It moves through the room, slowly stirring the candle flames, carrying with it the faint scent of the outside world. It is a simple act, but it feels significant. You step back outside, after a time the light brighter than it has been in days. The town is not restored. There are still empty spaces, still houses where no one answers, still the quiet absence of those who are gone. But there is movement. Adaptation has shifted into something else. Recovery, perhaps. You make your way toward the pest house, curious to see how it stands now. Inside, the atmosphere has changed slightly. There are still many lying on the pallets, still voices murmuring, still the scent of illness lingering in the air. But there are also signs of improvement. A man sits upright who was lying down before. A woman speaks more clearly, her voice steadier. The woman with the bucket moves with less urgency, her steps less hurried. It is not a transformation, but it is a change. Some recover, not all, but enough to be noticed. You speak briefly with one of the attendants. Fewer new arrivals, she tells you, and some have begun to leave. You nod. Good, you say. She smiles faintly, the expression small but genuine. Outside, the air feels lighter. You walk slowly back toward the centre of town, taking in the details you once might have missed. A door left open wide. A pair of neighbours speaking across a narrow space, their voices no longer hushed. A cart carrying goods rather than covered shapes. These are quiet signs, but they matter. As you pass the lane where you first encountered marked doors, you notice that some of the cloths have been removed. The symbols remain faintly visible, but they no longer carry the same immediate warning. Time has begun to move forward again. You pause at a corner, letting the moment settle. The fear has not vanished. It lingers in memory and habit in the way people still keep a slight distance from one another. But it is no longer the only force shaping the town. You think of the child Anna and wonder if someone came, if she has found care or if her story has taken a different path. You think of the man in the Guildhall setting his affairs in order, of the families gathered around beds, of the countless small moments that have filled these days. They do not disappear. They become part of what this place is now. There is quiet discussion among those who will later study such times about how communities emerge from events like this, whether they return to what they were or become something new entirely. From where you stand, it feels like both. The town remains, but it is altered. You adjust your satchel, though it feels lighter now, not from fewer contents, but from a shift in purpose. You are still needed, but perhaps not in the same way. You take a slow breath, the air cool and steady in your lungs. And then you continue walking. You walk without hurrying now. The town has not become safe in any simple way. Safety is too large a word, too bright, too confident for these streets. But the terror that once seemed to press against every shutter has loosened its grip. The air feels easier to enter. People still glance at one another, still measure distance, still pause when someone coughs. But they also carry water, mend fences, open stalls, and return to the small, stubborn tasks of living. The year is still 1348. The world has not learned the truth of the tiny organism that moves through blood, fleas, animals, breath, goods, and human closeness. The word bacterium waits centuries away. The great explanations of your time remain tied to corrupted air, divine judgment, imbalance in the body, the movement of planets and the suspicious habits of neighbours, who in truth are usually just as frightened as everyone else. Yet something has been learned. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but learned. You pass the Guildhall where the clerk stands outside in the morning light, his tablet tucked beneath his arm. He looks older than when you first met him, though only days or weeks have passed. Plague changes the face the way winter changes a field. It leaves marks that are not always visible at first glance. He nods to you. Fewer today, he says. You nod back. Good. Neither of you celebrates too loudly. That would feel like tempting the clouds to gather again. Instead, you share the small, careful relief of people who have seen too much to be foolish with hope. The records inside the Guildhall remain incomplete. Some names are missing. Some dates are uncertain. Some households were never fully counted. Even so, those marks matter. They are one way the town has tried to hold memory in place. Across plague-struck regions, written accounts, wills, turtles, sermons, chronicles, and civic records would preserve fragments of the catastrophe, allowing later generations to glimpse both the scale of death and the ordinary details of response. You continue past the square. The market is still thinner than before, but sound has returned. A woman bargains over salt with a seriousness that suggests civilization is healing nicely, because nothing says survival like arguing over the price of salt. A baker calls out that the morning loaves are ready. A boy runs between stalls carrying a basket too wide for his arms, and for a moment he nearly collides with a man carrying firewood. Both freeze, step back, then laugh once awkwardly. Laughter feels strange now. Not wrong, just familiar. You let the sound follow you down the street. At the church, the doors stand open and the bell hangs quiet. Inside, candles still burn for those who are gone. There are many of them. Too many for any one person to hold in the mind at once. Yet each candle insists on the dignity of a single life. This one for a mother. This one for a cooper's apprentice. This one for a girl's grandmother. This one for a man who made shoes or owed money or sang badly in taverns or loved someone who now stands alone. You pause at the threshold, not entering fully. The priest sees you and gives a faint nod. His face is drawn, but his posture remains steady. He has walked his own version of the same road from bed to bed, fear to fear, prayer to prayer. He has watched faith tremble and hold. So have you. People in 1348 do not separate the body and soul the way later medicine often will. For them, illness belongs to a world where heaven, earth, weather, food, emotion, sin, scent, and flesh all mingle. To a modern ear that may sound messy. To them it is simply reality. You have lived inside that reality now and you understand its weight. You move on. Near the lane where marked doors once lined the walls, you find some marks scraped away. Others remain faint scratches in wood that will outlast the fear that made them. A child runs a hand over one and asks an older woman what it means. She answers quietly and the child listens with solemn eyes. This is how memory begins, not in grand books first, but in little explanations given at doorways. A curious detail will grow in later imagination. The plague doctor will become a figure in a long coat, gloves, wide hat, and a bird-like mask filled with aromatic herbs. In your 1348 world, that full costume is not yet the fixed uniform people picture. Your protections have been simply improvised and shaped by local practice. Still, the seed of that image is here: cloth over the face, strong scents covered to hand's distance, and the hope that a barrier might stand between you and death. History has a talent for dressing memory in dramatic clothing. Honestly, the hat will do a lot of work. Debate remains among researchers over how much later plague doctor imagery should be projected backward onto the Black Death itself. Some emphasize continuity in ideas about air and scent. Others warn that the famous beaked outfit belongs more clearly to later outbreaks and should not be treated as standard in 1348. From inside your story, the answer feels simple. You wear what you have, you trust what seems useful, you keep moving. You reach the edge of the town where the road bends toward the fields. The same road brought you here when rumours were just becoming reality. Now it leads away, though not quite yet. You stand for a while looking back. The rooftops slope unevenly beneath the pale sky. Smoke rises from chimneys. The church tower watches over the square. Somewhere a hammer strikes metal. Somewhere else someone sings very softly while sweeping a floor. The town is wounded but not gone. You think of Martin in the first house of the frightened children, behind the cloth of Anna, by the hearth of the man dictating his will of the patients in the pest house of the clerk, marking names with a shaking hand. You think of all the small offerings placed into your satchel herbs, cloth charms, little pockets of courage. You have not conquered the plague. No one here has, but you have witnessed it. You have walked toward it when others stepped back. You have offered water-cloth-sent words, order and presence. Sometimes that was not enough. Sometimes it was all anyone had. And perhaps in this year, surrounded by death, that is what being a plague doctor truly means. Not being a hero with secret knowledge, not being a dark angel in a beaked mask, just being a person who keeps knocking, a person who enters, a person who stays long enough to say softly, "You are not alone." The road is quiet beneath your feet. The fields beyond it wait for the next season, indifferent and generous in the way fields can be. The wind moves through the grass with a low whisper, carrying away smoke bells, voices, and the last hard edges of the day. And now, as this long night of history begins to settle, you may let the town recede. Let the stone streets soften in your mind. Let the doors close gently, not in fear now, but in rest. The candle in the church burns lower, its light small and golden, steady enough for one more breath, then another. The clerk lays down his stylus. The baker covers tomorrow's flour. The child near the window is no longer watching the road, but sleeping, one hand tucked beneath her cheek. You do not need to walk any farther. The satchel can rest beside the bear. The herbs can release their faint green scent into the quiet room. The basin is still. The shutters are closed against the cool night, and beyond them, the town dreams uneasily, but it dreams. That is enough. The bell does not ring. For a moment there is only the soft hush of straw, the slow settling of wood, the distant breath of animals in their stalls, and the faintest thread of wind along the eaves. You breathe with it, slowly in, slowly out. The fear that filled the streets grows smaller now, less sharp, like a dark shape seen from far away across a field at dawn. History remains behind you, held safely in the past. You are here, warm and still, listening only to the quiet. The plague year fades into mist. The doctor's footsteps fade with it. The town grows dim, then gentle, then almost gone. And in that soft vanishing, there is room for sleep. Sweet dreams.